America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, March 9th, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jessie Singer, senior strategist and head writer at Transportation Alternatives, author of There Are No Accidents, The Deadly Rise of Injury and Disaster, Who Profits and Who Pays the Price. Also on the program today, Chernobyl knocked off its energy grid using generators to cool its nuclear fuel. Supposedly no reason to worry. Meanwhile, Ukrainian refugees reach 2 million, 1 million of whom are children. More civilian escape routes are created as negotiations continue. Poland has MiG fighters for Ukraine, but can't get them there. Can't get them from here to there, from there to there. U.S. bans Russian oil imports as EU outlines a path to be free of Russian fossil fuels by 2030. Congress scrambles to avoid a Friday government shutdown as we welcome back earmarks. That's a good thing. Speaking of good thing, Congress passes postal reform bill unshackling unfair postal service requirements for funding. We'll talk more about that. Texas man convicted by a grand jury over January 6 charges. And Enrique Tarrio, the former Proud Boy head, also indicted now on January 6 charges. The Don't Say Gay bill passes in Florida, awaits DeSantis's signature. It'll be coming. Missouri lawmaker introduces legislation to ban out-of-state abortions. Your abortion restriction or ban travels with you, is what she wants. Lastly, new study shows that half of U.S. adults were exposed to harmful levels of lead as children. Half. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Seder here. Emma Vigeland is on vacation for a couple of days. Today, I am told by one of our IMer, marks the 1 year of having a sub button on Twitch. Apparently now you can be monetized on that platform, so you can subscribe. Not only you can be a subscriber on YouTube, but you can subscribe on Twitch. All you do is hit that Twitch button, and apparently you don't have to pay anything, right? It's just like part of your Amazon price. Is that the way it works, Dorsey? Okay, Dorsey's not going to talk about it. Talk about poggers. Says Nug Wrangler.
Nice.
We're going to talk about that lead story just briefly before we get into other stuff. Longtime listeners of this program will know that, I mean, actually, there's two sort of like of my bailiwicks today. The Postal Reform Act reverses the 2006, I can't remember what the name of the act was, moved primarily by Republicans, although everyone was on board to more or less to some extent. A bill in 2006, a law that forced the Postal Service to fund its health care for retirees 75 years out. So in other words, it had to fund health care for people who will work at the post office who are not even born yet. There is no government agency, no private business, no NGO. There is no entity in the world that has that type of requirement. It caused the Postal Service to be in the red, I guess is what they call it, right? When you don't have, when you're running a deficit for years of billions of dollars. That has been fixed. And my understanding is, and the people are looking at that, the postal banking is protected within that act. I'm also hearing somebody's headphones. So if you, wherever that sound's coming from, we got to just take care of that. And then this other story, this other bailiwick of mine has been lead and the unintended consequences of things like lead gasoline. And on some level, this is an interesting analogy to what we're going to be talking about with Jessie Singer. As you know, in this country, leaded gasoline was outlawed largely around, I think it was 1972 when it was outlawed? I think there was different places. I can't remember what it was nationally, but in different locales. There's a new study that has shown that over 170 million U.S. born people who were adults in 2015 were exposed to harmful levels of lead as children. Researchers used blood lead level, census, and leaded gasoline consumption data to examine how widespread early childhood lead exposure was in the country between 1940 and 2015. So children born in the U.S. between 1950 and 1981 had blood lead levels higher than the CDC threshold. In other words, they had lead poisoning. Researchers found significant impact on cognitive development. On average, early childhood exposure to lead resulted in a 2.6 point drop in IQ. Now, IQ isn't necessarily the best measure of intelligence. We know that. But when it's measured against itself, it becomes a way of measuring. It's also an easier one. But we also know that there were massive crime drops across the country, and in fact, this tracks internationally, 20 years out from where lead gasoline was banned. I mean, this is fascinating. And incidentally, and this is, we're seeing this in the context of Flint, right? Where there was massive lead poisoning from the water, where you have an explosion of special needs education requirements in Flint because it affects child development, it affects brain development, it affects brain functioning, and not just in the moment, but years and years later. And I don't know if we'll ever know, but if you accept, well, there is a correlation, 20 years out, drops in crime across the country, internationally, wherever. But if you accept a causal connection between crime and lead exposure, there's a whole spectrum of behavior that exists between not having a lead exposed brain and one that leads to criminal or antisocial behavior. Atrios over at Eschaton posted, he said, you know, he doesn't think that young people understand how much of bar fights, the existence of bar fights was a regular thing when we, people our age, were in our 20s. And I just assumed it was still the same thing, but I just figured, you know, I'm not in that scene anymore, so I don't know about it. But when I was, you know, in my 20s or late teens, frankly, walking to a bar in Worcester, Mass, it was like, it was an aggro fest. It was like, could I get out of here without getting beat up? And it was just every type of bar. Newbury Street in Boston was like just a rolling brawl every weekend. And it was all people in their early 20s. And apparently it's not like that anymore. And so it speaks to a couple of issues. One is the unintended consequences. And certainly the people understood the implications of lead. We've gone through that. They understood. I mean, the houses, the factories where lead was used were considered literally madhouses. But it also speaks to externalities and who pays the price for things that create profit for other people. That's basically the theme in many respects of Jessie Singer's book, Accidents, The Deadly Rise of Injury and Disaster, Who Profits and Who Pays the Price. We will get to that in just a moment. Yesterday, Joe Biden delivered remarks at the White House. Two major developments, or I guess big pieces of news in terms of the response by the international community to what's going on with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. One is that Poland has, I don't know, I think it's almost close to 24 MiG fighters, Ukraine Army, or I guess Air Force, trained on MiG fighters. So to get them, you know, American built fighters doesn't make any sense. Poland has almost 24 MiG fighters that they essentially want to give to the Ukrainians. The problem is Poland doesn't want to send them directly from Poland, because then it can be taken by Russia as a Polish participation in the conflict. Poland wanted to send them to an American air base to then send them to Ukraine. America does not want to be seen as participating. And I think these are good reasons, because we don't want to expand or give Russia an excuse to expand the war to include the U.S. or NATO, both because we don't want World War III and because it diminishes domestic pressure on Putin if he can make the argument that the U.S. is actually involved in this, or, you know, NATO. So they're trying to figure out, apparently Kamala Harris is headed there with, I would imagine, a lot of military people, trying to figure out how they can get these planes to Ukraine without, I don't know how they do that. Maybe they just pretend somebody comes in and steals them. Maybe you just get like, isn't this where like some you know, tough guys on like on Fox News go and they say they're going to steal some jets? Where's Mike Bongino, whatever that guy's name is? Why doesn't Bongino get a crew of people like Kevin Sorbo and get a whole crew of like, you know, tough misfits and go over and steal the MiG jets and fly them into Ukraine? Here's Joe Biden announcing the other response by the international community. This is it's going to increase the price of gas in this country. It's an international market. It'll create greater demand on other suppliers. But here is, but we are also just, I think, a couple of weeks away from OPEC's deal to diminish production over the past 2 years, in which case we may see them increase production. Although my understanding is that Saudi Arabia is not answering the phone because they're still mad that Joe Biden doesn't appreciate the guy who chopped up a journalist being the head of their country. But here is Biden speaking about a ban on Russian fossil fuel import.
We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. This is a move that has strong bipartisan support in Congress and, I believe, in the country. Americans have rallied to support their Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war. We made this decision in close consultation with our allies and our partners around the world, particularly in Europe, because a united response to Putin's aggression has been my overriding focus, to keep all NATO and all of the EU and our allies totally united. We're moving forward with this ban, understanding that many of our European allies and partners may not be in a position to join us. The United States produces far more oil domestically than all the European countries combined. In fact, we're a net exporter of energy. So we can take this step when others cannot. But we're working closely with Europe and our partners to develop a long-term strategy to reduce their dependence on Russian energy as well. Our teams are actively discussing how to make this happen, and today we remain united. We remain united in our purpose to keep pressure mounting on Putin and his war machine.
The administration has done a good job, I think, in maintaining, some semblance of cohesion amongst all the allies here. And to be clear, this is a good example of why the idea of us upping production would drop prices. Because we're already selling oil and natural gas. We're exporting it already as a country. The bottom line is, when you hear people talk about increasing U.S. oil production or natural gas as a way of dealing with a situation like this, they're implying this is a national security issue. Americans are paying more money. And in that instance, your response should be, I agree, which is why we should be nationalizing all of these things. They should not be in private hands, because in private hands, what's going to happen is those private entities that are selling and exporting whatever fossil fuel they're exporting, they're going to say, well, you're going to have to pay me more money if I'm not going to meet that contract over there, and I'm going to meet the contract domestically. You're going to pay me more money. Okay, we'll pay you more money. What should happen is we should nationalize every interest that we have in this country, of every drop of oil that is being extracted, every bit of coal that's being extracted, every bit of natural gas that is being extracted. In fact, all of our energy should all be nationalized. You're going to see the behavior of a lot of people in Congress change very quickly if that were the case. It would change a lot of things. But if someone's going to push the argument, we need to drill more because it's a national security issue, then the obvious response is, then we should nationalize it. It is national security. We should nationalize it. But that won't happen. Quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll be back with Jessie Singer. Speaking of getting off of fossil fuels, the second part of the IPCC report dropped recently, things are looking pretty bleak. Now, nothing we do as individuals will really ultimately have the type of impact that we need to have, but it's still a good thing to do. It is part of the solution. And My Solar Nerd, sponsored this program before, they are on a mission which is fairly simple, which is to help people like you find the best solar program for your home and make the transition easy and smooth as possible. So here's the deal. It is very difficult to figure out exactly what you're supposed to do if you want to go solar. Right now is the time to do it because there's a 26% tax credit. That extension exists because of COVID, but it's going to end at the end of this year. It's going to drop down to 22%. So a longtime fan of this show who was working for other solar outfits saw that some of these were a little bit predatory, became a consultant. They have a long time experience in the solar industry. And essentially, if you're one of those people, you're a homeowner, you want to convert to solar, maybe it's a new build and you want to have solar, you're just not sure how to go about it. My Solar Nerd basically functions as your general contractor when it comes to solar installation. Helps you with all the possible options that you may not be aware of. You can retrofit a home with solar panels for almost no money down. Most homeowners that switch over to solar see significant savings starting in their first year. Again, this is a function of the solar investor tax credit. And what they do is they analyze your usage. They find the best equipment for your needs. They determine the incentives and financings that you may qualify for. And then they basically project manage the entire process between you and the installers, obtaining the permits, et cetera, finding where the finance are, telling you which forms you got to fill out, et cetera, et cetera. You should not wait on this. Like I say, some of those tax credits and incentives are sunsetting. The 26% tax credit drops down to 22% next year before going away. If a project is completed by the end of this year, qualifies for that 26%. Some markets are prone to power outages, and so they may qualify for off-the-grid backup solutions. And Majority Report listeners will get a $200 gift card upon installation of their solar system if they use My Solar Nerd's services. So go to mysolarnerd.com, fill out the inquiry form now, make sure you select a Majority Report listener for how you heard about My Solar Nerd to receive $200 gift card upon installation. That is mysolarnerd.com. We'll put that link in the show description. Check it out. Also, if you are anywhere within several miles of New York City or Brooklyn, tomorrow night, I will be doing my first public appearance in the 2020s. And that will be at the Bell House for the Bituation Room. Francesca, Fiorentini. I'm going to call her Francesca when I get there. She'll be at the Bell House. It's at 8 p.m. What is it? 7 p.m.? 7 p.m. Comedian Matt Lieb will be there. And New York City Council member Tiffany Caban will be there. And I'll be there. And Francesca will be there. So check it out. Bell House, Brooklyn, tomorrow night. All right, going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be talking to Jessie Singer. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Jessie Singer. She's senior strategist and head writer at Transportation Alternatives and author of her recent "There Are No Accidents: The Deadly Rise of Injury and Disaster. Who Profits and Who Pays the Price?" Jessie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's talk about let's just start with how you came to work in this field and to write this book. I know you worked with the late great Wayne Barrett, who was a guest on this program many times over the years and years. But how is it that you got interested in this particular topic?
My path to writing this book starts when I was an investigative journalist working with Wayne around 2006, when my best friend was killed on a bike and pedestrian path on the west side of Manhattan. He was killed by a driver who had accidentally turned onto the path. The driver was drunk, was speeding, proceeded down the path until he killed my best friend. But the path to me writing this book, I actually get here 11 years later, when a driver rented a truck and intentionally followed the exact same path as the driver who killed my best friend. That man killed 8 and severely injured 11 in a vehicular terrorist attack. But he'd followed the exact same path, and it started me kind of asking big questions about what had happened. And when I looked into it, I found that other people had died the exact same way. And the drivers had all behaved different. You know, some were drunk, some were lost, some were distracted. But the result was the same. Nothing was done because those were all accidents. And then after this terror attack, the city and state got together and they barricaded every entrance to this bike and pedestrian path. They made the accident and the terror attack impossible to occur again. And that's when I realized that accidents were sort of this magic, willful ignorance. And that's what drove me to look into the numbers. And what I found was incredibly disheartening.
And I have to say, like, this is a story about externalities. This is a story about, in some respects, privatizing profits and socializing costs, and this is a story about just decisions we make as a society. I mean, you could draw an analogy to the idea of, like, you know, we just increased child poverty by 41% by ending the child tax credits. Like, in other words, we know how to do certain things. It's just we're making decisions not to, and sometimes these decisions are sort of, it's not transparent that we're making these decisions.
I think you're totally right. And I think that's why we get with something like accidental death into like unseen crisis territory. You know, no one's talking about this, even though we're dying by accident more than any time in history. And the numbers are rising rapidly. In 2019, it was 173,000 Americans killed. In 2020, it was more than 200,000. And part of the reason, exactly like you were saying, is that these are supposed to be random, unpredictable things. But if that were true, then accidental death would be randomly distributed across the US, and it's not. Black and Indigenous people die by accident most often. People living in poverty die by accident most often. And that's especially true for accidents where policy and infrastructure make the difference between life and death. And so we're seeing the result of policy decisions and unregulated corporate power leading to unequally distributed risk across the US.
You made that point about the jump from 2019 to 2020, but you also write that the overall rate of accidental death since 1992 has it doubled? I think it was.
I think it's more than doubled. Currently, accidental death is rising much faster than the population. But the 1992 year is kind of interesting because you were talking about the child poverty tax credit. So throughout history, accidental death tracks with income inequality, which was why it was highest in the Industrial Revolution and why it's so high today. And the only way we ever see declines in accidental death is when we protect people. And there's two ways of doing that. So post-World War II, we build out the social safety net and we build a system of regulations. The regulations protect people in pretty obvious ways. You know, you're protected from a corporation because that corporation is regulated. But the social safety net also protects people because then people could afford to protect themselves. You know, You could afford to buy a safer car or not live in an unsafe apartment or not take the most dangerous job. And so after World War II, accidental death falls for decades, but it's been rising since 1992. What I see as the after effects of the defanging of our regulatory agencies and the dismantling of the social safety net.
You're right at one point, accidents are not a design problem. We know how to design the built environment to prevent death and injury in accidents, and accidents are not a regulatory problem. We know the regulations that will reduce the accidental death toll. Rather, accidents are political and social problem. To prevent them, we need only the will to redesign our systems, the courage to confront our worst inclinations, and the strength to rein in the powerful who allow accidents to happen. In fact, I mean, you don't like the term, or not just you, but there is a sense that we should not be using the term accidents for these events. You know, we have a longtime listener who's now an expert in these things who gets on me every time I say natural disasters, because there are no natural disasters. The disaster happens when we as a society make decisions to not prepare for nature, essentially.
I think you're totally right. And the language thing's a little tricky, right? Because there's two things going on here. Corporations and government negligence is taking advantage of the fact that we think these things are random. And part of what happens in any given accident is we focus on the last person who made a mistake. And we look to them and they say, oh, they screwed up. I'm not going to be like them. I wouldn't make that mistake. And then we move on. And so these questions of personal responsibility for all of us become a misleading distraction from our ability to solve the problem. Two examples. You're less likely to die by accident if you live in Europe than the United States. But if you live in West Virginia in the United States, you're more likely to die than anyone else in America by accident. So are people in Europe more responsible or people in West Virginia less? No, they're exposed to different conditions. And you can even break that down to like a micro level. Like imagine two speeding drivers, one rich, one poor. They both make the same mistake. They both make the same bad decision to accelerate too much in their car. But the rich driver is more likely to have automatic emergency brakes, which you can pay extra for, installed in their car. And so they're more likely to survive their mistake. And currently, we just don't have a system that requires these really simple ways to help us survive when things go wrong, built into the system.
Well, I mean, when we talk about the number of accidents rising so dramatically since 1992, I mean, rising dramatically really just over the past, from 2019 to 2020, like what are there certain categories of so-called accidents that are more prominently rising than others?
Yes, absolutely. Three major factors are leading the rise. Accidental drug overdoses, accidental traffic crashes, and accidental falls. And I put all those accidents in scare quotes.
And so what has contributed to what has been the policy decisions, or the policy decisions, I guess, or maybe the private decisions that are not been mitigated by policy that would have otherwise been mitigated by policy decisions that have led to those? I mean, do we know, or is it like, how do we disentangle those things?
Well, it's certainly complicated because it's hard to see the way that like a fall has to do with an opioid overdose. But they're related in the sense that we're not protecting people where we can protect people. So, fall deaths can be mitigated by, building into our infrastructure ADA accessibility, ramps and grab bars at every opportunity, where overdose deaths can be mitigated with safe injection sites and naloxone distribution. Part of the traffic crash epidemic we're seeing is an unregulated auto industry where vehicles are getting much, much larger and much more powerful, but no one's controlling for those factors. So you're in this situation where either you're a pedestrian struck by a much more powerful car, or you're a person living in poverty driving an older, less powerful, less safe car and getting struck by these much larger vehicles. So the common ground here is both the failure of regulation and the failure to give people the opportunity to protect themselves, but also this lack of consideration that we just need to protect people from their mistakes rather than expecting them to somehow be perfect.
Well, so I want to tease these different things out, because the second one you're talking about, it's sort of almost like a societal disposition, and I wonder if that has actually changed as much as, as much as we're just simply not aware of what's happening on the other side of the equation, right? Like, I mean, for instance, so there's a profit motive to build these bigger vehicles because they get a higher markup on them, and so we could see in the data that there haven't been necessarily a rise in the amount of times that someone bumps into someone else, that someone drives their car or their vehicle into another person. It's just those end up being more, creating more fatalities, and or they don't, or maybe there has been a rise in how many times people drive their car into somebody because they're less likely to see a person because they're up here in their SUV and the person's down here. Whereas, like, if I'm in my, tiny, not tiny, but my normal size Nissan, I'm down, sports car or hatchback or whatever, I have a better line of sight to, maybe a kid or maybe I have more stopping power with a smaller car because I don't have such a massive vehicle that's, going down the street. So that's one element of it, right? That's going on there. Has the attitude towards blaming individuals changed, or is it just that we have there's just more opportunity for accidents to take place because the regulatory system, I don't know that people are aware that the regulatory system changed 30 years ago, let's say. You know what I mean? Like the overall regulatory regime, I guess 40 years ago now, when regulations started to assess risk in a different way. I don't know that your average citizen's any more or less aware of that. It's just that they're out there and they're just less protected, and they don't necessarily correlate with the profits that car manufacturers want to make with more dangerous cars.
I think that's absolutely true. And both things are happening, right? The cars are getting bigger, the crashes are getting more severe. The regulatory framework isn't watching or trying to solve those problems. And I think that's an important thing to remember about when people die by accident, is that the path to death is layered. One thing we see is that hospitals are shutting down across rural areas in the United States. And so part of the, we know many of the causes of the opioid epidemic, but one thing that's affecting whether or not you die from an overdose is how far away the nearest hospital is and how quickly an EMT can get to you. And so that's kind of like a good example of how these overall economic trends connect to these micro factors that matter whether you live or die in an accident.
There's a parallel here to COVID, both in terms of like on the protection side and on the risk side. Will you talk
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think COVID has made us all micro experts in risk exposure, right? But the story we're often told about COVID is, that risk exposure is a matter of personal choice. Your vaccine, your mask. But when it comes down to it, what really defines whether you live or die by COVID is whether or not you have to go to work or you get to stay home, whether your health is already in decline. And so it's a good example of how these layered risks already occur.
Also, I guess on top of that too would be the closure of public hospitals. I mean, we've seen, at least in the context of New York, if you're living in an area where public hospitals have been closed and or defunded in many respects, the death toll is higher as well.
Yes, and that's definitely something that's happening in places like West Virginia, where rural hospitals can't afford to stay open and are shutting down. And so then your transit time to a hospital might be 2 hours. That's not survivable in a lot of accidents.
We should also say that too, when we talk about, sort of increased deaths by car, essentially, there seems to be like so many different players, if you will, or parties who are profiting on the factors that lead to those higher deaths, right? Like, I mean, the obvious one is the car companies that are are making vehicles that are more prone to, to kill people. But also, it seems to me that commute times are up, which is putting money in the pockets of real estate developers, in the sense that, like, we can charge higher rents in the city, get our workers from the suburbs, they're going to have to drive more. And so they're paying essentially for us to raise our rents because we're going to need labor here, but they're paying for it in more time in their car. They got to spend more time commuting. They got to pay for their gas, and they also got to pay for their lives.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we see that in, for example, there's no safer way to get around than public transit. But that is not going to necessarily profit someone, but it's also going to reduce accidental death.
Let's talk about Vision Zero, which has been adopted. Tell us what that is and how we fare with Vision Zero in this country versus other countries.
Vision Zero in the United States is a program out of Sweden that essentially says that we have to protect human life at all costs. The version we have in the US is a little less effective because we actually spend a ton of money on enforcement and education, which are largely useless to the problem, instead of spending money to change our infrastructure and re-engineer our roads.
And let's talk about the concept of blame as you talk about it, and consequences versus punishment.
Absolutely. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, punishment is largely an ineffective way to solve the accidental death problem. We aren't particularly responsive to punishment, especially punishment through police enforcement, which is totally random. So we see our getting caught speeding, for example, as a matter of luck, rather than as a matter of, whether or not we were doing something that we will guaranteed get punished for. And so there's this problem that occurs where we're not actually looking at prevention, because I think, again, punishment doesn't prevent anything. It doesn't reduce the harm of our mistakes. It just tries to focus in on personal responsibility as this be all and end all solution to when things go wrong.
Let's also talk about the idea of highway stops and police work during this. It's not as effective as people tend to think.
It's not effective at all, actually. There was one study of 33 states and 12 years of traffic stops, and they could find no correlation between whether or not you died in a traffic crash in those places and the level of police enforcement. And again, because police enforcement is a random consequence. You speed 5 days of the week, you get caught one, you think, oh, bad luck, I'll try again tomorrow. So policing as a solution to the accident problem is just focusing on the wrong thing. Because when it comes down to it, our goal should be to prevent harm, not to try and change human behavior. I mean, it is so hard to change human behavior. Think about all the people who've already abandoned their New Year's resolutions, and that's stuff they want to do. Much less a behavior that helps them, like speeding to go faster to work, where we know how to re-engineer our roads so people want to drive faster. Speed governors is a technology that's existed since the 1920s that could prevent a car from exceeding the speed limit. And it can do it autonomously today, reading the actual speed limit signs. But these advancements require regulation. They require controlling our accidental death scenario in a way that looks at protecting people, not punishing them.
The likelihood of me getting a phone call from a libertarian after this interview in our second half of our show, where we take phone calls, and saying, well, we make these type of trade-offs all the time. If we really wanted to end if we really wanted to end these type of things, we could drop the speed limit to 30 miles per hour. What is your response to that? And I know that you just messaged us that you're having some computer issues. So if you cut out, you cut out. But What's your response to that idea that we could just drop the speed limit to 15 miles an hour?
Personally, I'm on the team of protecting human life at all costs. If we can save lives by reducing the speed limit to 15 miles an hour, there will be other costs, but no one will die. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and at least a beautiful attitude to go into this problem, looking at this problem with how can we protect people? And you really see this in the overdose crisis of a failure to protect people because we're like, oh, it costs too much. It costs us too much in some ethical judgment or some social judgment. You know, and you see the economists at this in these junctures bring out the moral hazard argument. You know, after seatbelts were first regulated, economists were like, seatbelts are a moral hazard because people might be more reckless. And recently, economists have made the argument that naloxone distribution is the same thing, a moral hazard, because people might use drugs more recklessly. And it's again these attitudes of blame and judgment that don't solve any problems, where we could be preventing all of these deaths if we simply stepped back from this obsession with personal responsibility and how we can police everyone's behavior and instead just gave them what they needed to survive.
We should say also that same moral hazard argument was deployed by Christian fundamentalists with the HPV vaccine, that by giving that HPV vaccine to young women and girls would increase their sexual behavior. That, incidentally, aside from it being completely nuts as a theory, in practice, it's been also completely wrong. I don't think I think it's other factors that have lessened teen pregnancy and teen sexual activity, but it shows that there's no correlation there. All right, so let me. What can we do? Like, what things are there to do? And let me just lastly ask you too about your response there. Is it that we have a sort of organic societal, sense that there should be personal responsibility? Or is this a narrative that is promoted by corporate interests? I mean, you talk about the story of hot coffee, the McDonald's coffee thing. And I'm just familiar with that because I go down and I deal with tort lawyers every couple of times a year in a conference. And there was a movie about that incident called Hot Coffee that showed that, like, this was not a question of someone's individual responsibility. She was mocked mercilessly, this woman who burned herself from this McDonald's coffee, but there was a lot more to the story. And it was really about McDonald's trying to maximize their profits when it came to coffee by keeping it at a super hot temperature. And there were hundreds of people who got hurt by this. Is this a human characteristic or an American characteristic, or is it something that is being promoted by corporate interests so that they don't have to foot the bill to not put out products or to set up things in such a way that people aren't harmed by them?
I think it's a case of both. I think accidental death like this is terrifying. It scares us. And so we react to it by saying, oh, who can I find to blame? Who's responsible? And that comforts us a great deal. And I think corporations and a negligent government takes advantage of that and essentially creates this narrative where it has to be a matter of personal responsibility if you spill your coffee on your lap, even if the coffee cup is almost designed to fall apart and the coffee is known to be heated well above safe temperatures. And you were asking about what we do about this. And I think the most important point I want to impart is that accidents are simple. This is not cancer. This is not COVID. We know how to solve this problem. We know how to prevent accidental death. It is as simple as putting a pillow between us and our mistakes. And so systemically, what we can do is, refund and revive our regulatory agencies to rein in corporate power and rebuild the social safety net so people can protect themselves. But there's also a lot you can do locally because there are so many ways to prevent accidental death. Advocating for traffic calming and public transit expansions are going to reduce deaths on your roads. Advocating for safe injection sites and free naloxone in your city or your town is going to reduce overdose deaths. Fighting for ADA accessibility like ramps and grab bars is going to reduce fall accidents. Safety regulations for fire like sprinklers and automatic self-closing doors absolutely make the difference between life and death in an accidental fire. And all of these solutions requires focusing on the last thing that went wrong or the last person who made a mistake, and rather accepting that mistakes are inevitable, but premature death is not. and putting in these systems in place that prevent harm when we inevitably make mistakes.
People should really get the build those muscles in terms of doing this locally, because we're on the verge of having a Supreme Court that is going to completely eviscerate the ability for things like the EPA or the FDA or OSHA or other federal agencies to do this type of work. You're
exactly right.
All right. Well, Jessie Singer, the book is entitled Accidents, the Deadly Rise, excuse me, There Are No Accidents, The Deadly Rise of Injury and Disaster, Who Profits and Who Pays the Price. We will put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks, definitely worth a read, fascinating book. And it really, understanding this dynamic of when we talk about so-called accidents, being a function of policy, they don't go up. People haven't become more accidental. People aren't more accidental in America than they are in Europe. People aren't more accidental in West Virginia than they are in, I don't know, Elmira, New York. It's really just a question of how people are situated, how many protections there are, how much abuse corporations are getting away with. And you see it. Look, the lead story is just a perfect example of this. They knew that lead was dangerous. I think the person who actually even came up with the idea of putting lead in gasoline because it was going to make it more, I think it was going to make it more stable or something like that. It was going to, it was a profit motive. I think was aware, wait a second, this could be detrimental. And ultimately, the government has the ability to regulate it. It does. We see crime drop. Again, there's a lot of evidence that it's associated with it. There's no definitive proof, but we just saw this new report that shows there's there's proof that, or at least this research makes it pretty clear that there's a pretty strong causal connection between essentially IQ and lead. That's just really a surrogate for other brain development functions or brain development. But a book like this is a good way to introduce to people the idea of externalities and the idea of that we are making choices, even if those choices are not obvious. And by we, I mean our society and our government. Really interesting way to get people into a mode of thought where they start to understand that some of this stuff is, and went through the same thing with the 2008 financial crisis, where people thought there was that people were immiserated by their own failed individual decisions, as opposed to a systemic problem. People didn't realize, wait a second. I got this loan. I wasn't quite sure I understood the terms. I didn't, and there was hundreds of thousands of other people in the exact same boat as me. That's not a function of our ignorance. That's a function of the loan officers who failed to do their fiduciary responsibility. It's the reason why we call them loan officers as opposed to just loan salesmen, because they're not selling us a stereo. I know nobody buys stereos anymore, but that was always the shtick. Like you go into like Tweeter, et cetera, and they upsell you. You got to get the one with the big subwoofers, man. We never called those guys stereo officer sales. You know, there's a fiduciary responsibility. Banks get federally insured. Anyways, check out that book. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Also, this. Happy birthday to someone in the Majority Report family, Jamie Peck. I think she's turning like 27 today or something like that. I don't know. It's her birthday. So go wish Jamie happy birthday on Twitter. Also, don't forget Majority Live. Brooklyn show sold out, but you can get a streaming ticket for it. And yes, you'll be able to watch it after the fact. Here's the deal. If you sign up for the AM Quickie, go to amquickie.com. Every day for the next couple of days, really probably until the show, we're including a coupon code that gives you over 50% off the streaming costs. You don't want to miss this. We've got a bunch of different things that are planned. Still searching around for who we're going to invite and crazy stuff. And then, of course, you also have the opportunity to go see us in Boston. We'll push the Boston show after the New York show even more. But I got a special guest lined up for the Boston show who is, let me put it this way. The special guests that you cannot promote, those are the big ones. So those are the big ones. So check that out on Majority Live. Also, I said the Just Coffee. And don't forget, we have merch, shop.majorityreportradio.com. You can check that out as well. And go check out Left Reckoning. Matt, of course, is vacationing in Europe, taking a European vacation. But go back and check out some of that stuff. All right. 646-257-3920 is the phone number. We will see you in the fun half. You can IM the show by getting the app at majorityapp.com.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false. No, I'm sorry. Women's...
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is this?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm going to go throw up.
Who libertarians? They're so stupid, though. Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge met.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35 501 1/2 3/8
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
$3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Dealing with technical issues. Bear with us occasionally. New Wrangler. Is it Nug Wrangler or Noog? What is it?
Nug.
I don't care. I don't care. Subscribing on Twitch is different from YouTube. On Twitch, it means people are paying monthly to support the stream and get the channel-specific emotes. You get a cut. One can subscribe for free if they have Amazon Prime, taking money from Bezos and giving it directly to the stream. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Nicole from Buffalo. The lead thing really explains a lot, doesn't it? I mean, I think it's pretty compelling. The definitive article about this that I have seen was written by Kevin Drum. I think it was in Washington Monthly. I think you got to Google it. I think it was from like 6-7 years ago. He compiled a lot of the data. And that is the one thing that, I don't hear it now. That may help. I don't know. Maybe that's just those, whatever. Maybe you have it particularly loud but I'm sensitive to that things. Teacher Lauren, happy snow day. It's snowing upstate. To get school off. It's snowing upstate 3 days after it was 68 degrees. I'm sure that's not an issue. It was 74 in New York City the other day. And Troma, hi Sam, one of your Twitch mods here. You've had Twitch subs enabled for the better part of a year, haha. But glad to see you shining some light on your lovely Twitch folks, poggers. Oh yeah, I know that. It's just it takes me a while to warm up to something like that. We didn't even talk about subscribing to YouTube for the first 5 years. So. But yes, if you're out there on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends to. Give us a thumbs up. Right?
Turn on the bell.
You turn the bell on, for God's sakes. And if you're poggers, subscribe on our Twitch feed.
You got this.
Battle Cat from Discordia. Hi. Tom Club, the boomers being lead poisoned sure would explain quite a bit. Yeah. Now, of course, we're doing it with PFAS now, and we have all sorts of other chemicals that we're putting out there. Between the 101 and the 5. No wonder we have a geriatric A- a-holes running this damn world. Lead. Yeah. Anthony Pittsburgh, do you feel the relationship between lead and crime is due to the effect of lead on the brain and not an indicator of relationship between the humanity of water system and the humanity of a system that led to criminal lead behavior?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Do I feel the relationship between lead and crime is due to the effect of lead on the brain? Yes. And you do not feel it's an indicator of the relationship between the humanity of a water system with the humanity of a system that led to criminal behavior. I'm not sure I understand what that means, an indicator relationship, but I can tell you that our relationship between our water system and criminal behavior has not changed, but the level of crime has dropped dramatically 20 years out from when there was not lead in the atmosphere, in the direct atmosphere, in the air. So you would have to show me, I'm not sure I understand the second half of that thing, but if you're saying it's some type of like, I guess like, you know, I don't know, philosophical relationship between human dignity and our water system, I would say that hasn't changed, but crime has gone down dramatically. And the one thing that has changed is that there's less lead as people's brains are developing. Between the 101 and the 5. Oh, yeah, I read that. Teacher Dan, Sam, when school is in session, I have to watch the vid late in the day. Oh, the video. Okay. Tuesday, when it was all Emma, no you, I thought that Mickey had come and delivered a message about trash talking the empire. Mickey, don't F around. This is he referring to Mickey Mouse. Over April break, I might call in to talk with you about your slow approach to truth regarding the Democrats and the show's love of pretending perpetual ineptitude and not knowing how to fight or fight back in the party's actual problem. Love the elementary school teacher, third-party nihilist who knows Cortland apples kick those other apples' asses. Well, Teacher Dan, your appreciation of Cortland apples is, I think, is indicative of your assessments in general. And B, yes, I very much welcome you to call in during your April vacation, because that is also when I will be on vacation, as my kids will be on vacation and I will be dealing with my kids on their vacation. So yes, I look forward to that. Daredevil with Matt and Emma gone today. This is more like the seniority report with Sam Senile. Love the show. Left is best. Darren NV, I want to apologize for not including Dorsey. Please correct me on my spelling if I have it wrong. With Bradley in my shout out to the crew yesterday. Thanks to Emma for pointing that out when reading my IM at the end of the show. Custodial artist. I heard once that lead poisoning is one of the leading causes of people who held normal ideas have grown into full QAnon flat earther. Really does make sense. The people I knew as a child with at least a base of understanding, common knowledge, are absolutely insane now. Left is best. Question for the guest. Does the difference in road construction and design also contribute to crashes? Of course it does. Have you heard or seen the idea that lead poisoning is why we have seen a rise in QAnon, flat earthers, and other conspiracy theories? No, I have not. Well, we got to turn the phone calls on. Do this. I think that should do it, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's get to some of the clips we have here. We did the Joe Biden talking about the oil imports. I don't know. What should we do? Insane. Oh, let's just do Steven Crowder, since we talked about the oil import ban. You know, the conservatives have a real problem here because they have been extolling the virtues of Putin for an extended period of time. They want you to believe that so much of this is a function of what they call Russiagate. I mean, I mean, and we were quite clear on this program. We never thought that Donald Trump was in cahoots with the Russian government. If anything, I think we would repeatedly say that we thought like somebody in the operation probably had somebody who would steal credit cards and would, so they would go to like, is there any chance you guys can, but it turns out that Russia was engaged in, pumping stuff out on Facebook. And, I don't know and have never known how much that had really impacted the outcome of the 2016 election. We know that there was a dozen other factors. I would argue the least reported factor was keeping that Supreme Court seat open by Mitch McConnell. But nevertheless, the reason why people are upset at Russia now is not because of the Russiagate hoax to whatever extent that existed. The reason is because they have, regardless of whether you consider they had legitimate concerns about the expansion of NATO, certainly nobody who would justify U.S. intervention, bombing, invasion of another country because of second, third, fourth order concerns about security. I mean, that's just absurd. I certainly wouldn't. No one on the left I know would do that. But so the right wing has a little bit of a problem. And Steven Crowder has a problem with how to talk about this war. Steven Crowder's problem is that he doesn't want to sort of like, he doesn't want to fall on a side here. And how do you do that? Well, you just say a pox on both their houses, and it really doesn't matter that one of them is invading and killing and creating millions of refugees. Here's Steven Crowder.
Didn't they just make it illegal for able-bodied men to leave Ukraine?
Yes.
18-year-old men? Yeah, that's always a good sign. By the way, I just want to be clear. Of course, my heart goes out to all the people of Ukraine, of the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. I know it's Ukraine, not the Ukraine. Yeah, it's very easy to say because it's just Ukraine sounds weird coming out of your mouth.
Pause it for 1 second. Now, it is the case that if you're fighting age, you've been conscripted into the Ukrainian army. Apparently, they've had to do this with very few people. The vast majority overwhelming majority of Ukrainians have stayed to fight. Many women have stayed to fight as well. There's also some evidence that there's been conscripts from Russia, which is pretty amazing. But the idea that you're going to say that like they're being invaded, it's not really a conflict at this point. It really is an invasion, any more than like, I don't know, debating, let's say an elementary school kid is real and you're like a 35-year-old man. Is that really a debate? Is that really a debate? You guys, we're debating. I called it a debate. This is a college kid. I'm 20 years older than this college kid, but I'm debating them. I played, I had a tough one-on-one basketball game with my 9-year-old the other day. It was a real game, man. Real game. This is an invasion. Go ahead.
People. But you really are looking at one corrupt shithole fighting another corrupt shithole. Let's not act as though Ukraine is a bastion of freedom over there, okay? Yeah. If you have to ban your own citizens from leaving your country, that means that a good portion of them don't want to stay and fight because they don't think what you've created, and by you I mean, of course, as well the Obama administration, the administration that you've installed is worth fighting for. Can you imagine having to ban Americans from fleeing the country if there was a home invasion? No, they have the opposite problem.
Pause it. Incidentally, for the better part of the 20th century, we had what was known as a draft. where you were not allowed to not go into the military. Do we still have registration? I think you still got to register for the military. Is he completely unaware of this? Is he completely unaware of this? And this is, incidentally, this is not a draft or registration for a potential draft that we're going to exercise if we're invaded. No, this is for us to invade other countries. When we invaded Vietnam, which incidentally is not even on the same continent, it's not even the same hemisphere as this country. Guess, here's the dirty secret that apparently everybody's been hiding from Steven Crowder. They didn't volunteer. They were conscripted. It was illegal for them not to go. What would he say about a country that is not only is saying you can't leave because we're being invaded, but you have to go into our military and we're going to make you go somewhere else and kill those other people? That sounds like a country really lacking in freedom. How many decades would it take for a country to recover from that lack of freedom, I wonder? I wonder if that information was in a holster. Would Crowder be able to access it better? But go ahead.
They're constantly concerned about Americans with guns because they know they're going to plant their feet in their soil and defend what's theirs.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are enough Ukrainians who don't want to defend that place that they are trying to leave, and a new law had to be created to Muppet hook them back.
Yeah.
Major companies.
Incidentally, the law was not like a new law. It was basically when there was an invasion coming, they started the law. They didn't know how many people were going to leave. And by all accounts, I mean, you don't see a lot of videos coming out of Ukraine with guys going like, I don't want to fight. And why might someone want to leave Ukraine right now? Are there people trying to leave Russia? Why might someone have an urgent desire to leave Ukraine right now? Could it be because of the bombing that is taking place by the Russian army? What is going on with this guy? He's got to say, like, both sides are bad people. I mean, it may be the case that Ukraine is got a lot of corruption. It does. But, I mean, let's be clear here. There is one very clear aggressor. And the idea that Ukraine should be bombed in submission because of the fault of the U.S. I mean, you could say that NATO expansion made Russia paranoid, but to say that, like, the Ukrainians sort of had it coming because the United States wanted to expand NATO, that's a twisted perspective on this. But for some reason, Steven Crowder doesn't want to get on the wrong side of where the conservative mentality is, which is with the authoritarian state. But he thinks that things like a draft, which is what this is in Ukraine, while they're being invaded, while civilians are being bombed, is the worst thing one could imagine. Wait till he finds out about what's gone on in this country. It's going to be very rough for Steven Crowder. I have a feeling he's going to we'll be curious to ask him about that, but then I would imagine there was probably something wrong with his kids on that day. He gets very nervous, apparently. That's the problem. That's the other problem that you have when you're debating only college students, or when your segment to change my mind about something, you're basically only enlisting people who don't know the topics that they're supposed to change your mind about. It makes you a little bit soft. Speaking of right-wingers who are I can't even tell what, Tucker Carlson's in just full on triage mode right now. Because for weeks, months, years, I don't know. But at the very least, 4 weeks in the run up to this invasion, why should we care about Ukraine? Why wouldn't I root for Russia? These are, if not direct quotes, pretty darn close. And then Tucker realizes, oops, even the morons who watch me on a regular basis, unironically, they have a problem with civilians being bombed for no apparent reason. So how am I going to tack away from this? I've already done my best, if I'm Tucker Carlson, to blame Kamala Harris for this. Kamala Harris is the reason why I said I don't care about Ukraine and I support Russia was because Kamala Harris faked me out. But he's still got more. He's still looking for the one that's going to work. Here he is.
Turns out Americans are delighted to be poor and helpless. They love it because poverty means holding Russia accountable. Not Putin's poverty. That's not going to happen. Your poverty. Well, how exactly does your poverty hold Putin accountable? CNN didn't ask that question, but the polling company Rasmussen did ask. That's what they do. They asked this question, quote, if a wider war breaks out in Europe, should the U.S. military be involved? Pretty simple question. The answer was not simple, though. The answer varied by income. This may not surprise you. The people who actually fight our wars, the people making under 30 grand a year, were overwhelmingly opposed to this war. Only 37% of them supported military action. And then it changed going up. The richer and more cut off from physical reality people got, the more ardently they supported war with Russia. And it turns out that's the subset you see. Those are the people on television, the people with fake jobs and inherited money. They're totally for it. And they're for it because they're going to pay no cost. But
I know this is off point, and I'm going to get to the point where he sort of conflated the idea of banning Russian oil and the impact that's going to have on people, and it will have on people. He conflated that with the idea of actually joining into a war, which is not on the table at all. But I want people just to take a moment and contemplate the amazing audacity it must take for Tucker Carlson to talk about rich elite people, B, talk about people who have inherited money, and he has yet to even inherit. He's just been coddled by the Swanson fortune since he was a young child. He also sued with his brother, his mom's estate, to get some of her oil royalties. And he was estranged from his mom. She left the family when he was, I think, about 8 or 9. And this is also a guy who was ushered into, in addition to the 2 private schools he went to, and that private school sounds almost, one was St. George's in Rhode Island, and what was the other one that was in like Switzerland? I mean, this is a guy who is literally the poster child for the worst of the worst aristocratic rich. The guy who cares nothing about anyone else, who was so mad that the people up in Maine took issue with, some of the stuff he wanted to build in his house up there, his house in Florida, his place in New York. But I just find it amazing. I'm sorry. He went to Collège du Liman in Geneva. Then he got kicked out of there and went to St. George's in Newport, Rhode Island. That's where all the mansions are. And then his girlfriend's dad, who happened to be the dean at St. George's, got him into Trinity, where his folks were a member of the Diamond Club. The Diamond Club is the top tier of donators to the college. Anyways, go back a little bit. I didn't even want to bring any of that stuff up. It's just that when I hear him talk that way, it's just amazing to me.
That's the subset you see. Those are the people on television, the people with fake jobs and inherited money. They're totally for it. And they're for it because they're going to pay no cost, but they'll still get to feel virtuous about promoting it. Then they'll tune into Stephen Colbert at night with a clean heart. As for the Americans who will do the actual fighting and then the suffering here at home, they don't count. Because in a democracy, you can safely ignore the middle class. And so our leaders are doing that. Watch.
But the truth is, we should be thinking about the fact that when Americans go to fill up their cars, that they should think about sticking it to Putin when they put that gas handle and the gas in your gas tank. It's going to cost a little more, and part of it's going to be because of Russia, and just stick it to Putin.
Now, here in America, we got to be ready for the fact that will drive up oil prices, that will drive up gas prices. And if we are really standing with Ukraine, we have to be prepared to absorb that.
Ban all Russian imports into the United States in terms of oil and gas. 4% of our oil supply comes from Russia. We can easily make that up. So what we haven't done yet is go after the oil and gas sector in Russia. That's the Achilles heel to Putin's war machine.
They don't care about you at all. They have complete contempt for you and your interests. Notice they don't even bother to apologize to you for what they're about to do to you and your family, which will change your life. We're not overstating it. Now, who are they? The first two men you saw in that montage were Democrats. The third was Lindsey Graham. We'll let you decide what he is, apart from utterly loathsome, obviously. But we have to tell you that virtually every elected Republican in Washington, D.C. is fully on board with this, which is another way of saying they are totally committed to screwing their own supposed constituency, which would be America's shrinking, desperate middle class. Those are the people who vote
understand
Republican.
For a second. Pause it, understand. This is not about, this desire to screw over the middle class is not about sticking it to Putin or whatever it is. It's about the interests of the oil and gas and fossil fuel industries in this country, for whom a lot of these people carry a lot of water. And Tucker Carlson is also one of those people. If Tucker Carlson really cared about the middle class that he sort of seems like he thinks he's sort of a part of, because he's not like one of those trust fund kids who got everything handed to him from Collège de l'Humain in Geneva to St. George in Newport to Trinity to the jobs that his Republican operative dad got him. Now a lobbyist for Viktor Orban, which is just sort of a coincidence that Tucker also is a huge fan of Viktor Orban's. If Tucker genuinely cared, he would be promoting things like charging stations around the country for electric cars, which would drive the cost of electric vehicles way down. Because manufacturers would know they'd be able to produce volume of these vehicles. He'd be pushing for subsidies to develop battery technology. He'd be pushing for a whole host. He'd be pushing for if he was concerned about the middle class, why isn't this guy screaming at the top of his lungs about the one measure that we know diminished child poverty by 41%? And that is the child tax credit. Why isn't he talking about, if you're worried about middle class people, why isn't he talking about things like universal daycare, universal pre-K? Why isn't he talking about single-payer health care? Because at the end of the day, he doesn't care about those things. He just weaponizes it when it comes to having to run cover for himself for cheering on Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
And this is what they get in return. No apology. Shafted. It's hard to remember a betrayal at this scale. And yes, we have been here before, by the way. We've been in conflicts with Russia for a long time. The United States traded with the Russians through the height of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union and the United States had nuclear weapons pointed right at each other, and we worried one might go off. We traded with Joseph Stalin in the middle of his terror, at the very moment he was murdering 4 million, yes, Ukrainians. That happened. And then we armed Stalin. We armed the Soviet army as he was killing Ukrainians. And the New York Times endorsed all of it. But now, because Putin invaded Ukraine, effectively encouraged by the Biden administration to do that, which is true, because that happened, we are going to send billions of dollars to the Saudi theocracy, and then to the Iranians, and then to Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And at the same time, we're going to embrace green energy, which means giving the government of China complete control over a power grid here in America. That's our plan. Are you confused by it? Don't be. It's a moral victory. Let us know when you get tired of winning.
Well, what is his plan? Is it to nationalize our oil fields? It's amazing the BS this guy puts out. It really is amazing. And it's all a function of, now it's Biden's fault that Putin invades Ukraine, which is exactly what he was cheering for the other day. Why wouldn't I be rooting for Russia, is what he said, weeks ago? Was it maybe a month ago? Laughing and laughing. Because at the time, it was what he thought his audience wanted. Because that's the other thing. He believes nothing. He believes nothing except for the dollars that he sees in his bank account. And I don't even think it's about that, because he has all the money he needed. I think it's more about some psychological issue he's got going. I think it's bad for kids when they lose their parents at age 9, and he effectively did. It really is one of the worst times, I think, to lose a parent. And she didn't die, but she just left him. And I think that probably it would take years of therapy, I think, before he decided not to do that. I think at one point he was highly critical 22 years ago, of Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly's shtick, he said. Bill O'Reilly pretends to be an everyman, pretends to be in the corner of the little guy, the middle class guy. And he was convinced at that time, 20 some odd years ago, in a book he wrote, that O'Reilly's going to get discovered one day. One day they're going to find out that he yelled at a stewardess, wanted a different type of champagne, whatever it was. And they would find him out, and the charade would be over. And then I think something that Tucker realized at one point was, actually, no, they never found out. It was just that Bill O'Reilly was such a horrible human being that he could not do anything except for sexually harass people who would work for him. But his audience never figured out that he was a fraud. And at one point, Tucker realized, wait a second, this is a path. And he was right. He was right. And every now and then he's got to throw in this projection about the elite who are on the other channels, the other TV shows, out of touch with real people. Not like him, man of the people. I'm going to have dinner with George W. Bush. Well, I'm back down in house number 2 or 3 in Florida. 4. I don't know. It's fascinating. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas. What's going on? Dude, let me ask you this. What's the situation there with COVID? Because I got to make a decision as to whether I'm going to go to the April tort lawyers thing, and I'm leaning towards it.
I mean, Sam, I'm gonna give you my honest opinion. One of my jobs, I work in nightlife or whatever. I'll get straight to the point. It's a shit show. I mean, the lifting the mandates or whatever. But I had multiple, and I worked in a big time casino. Actually, multiple casinos, and they weren't very, you gotta get the money going. You gotta get the money going, Sam. So of course, there was protocols there, but in a nightclub, there's people without masks. The staff had to wear masks and stuff. I mean, I know how you are, Sam. So, I would be very careful because at the end of the day, I mean.
That I don't go to nightclubs that often.
Right. But what I'm trying to say, though, I'm sorry, but what I'm trying to say, though, Sam, overall in casinos or whatever, people wear masks or whatever, but in a lot of places, it's just mask off. So if you're walking around the casino or whatever, right, Sam, you're going to see people with the mask on, but as soon as you get into a venue, whatever, it's off, and go to the races. You get what I'm saying? So it's very touch and go. Very touch and go.
All right. What else is on your mind? Thanks for that tip. I will take that under advisement.
No, absolutely. Two things. One, I have some good news. I'm in the running for a union job. It's funny too because I'm in the running for a union job, and it was funny too, Sam. There was a gentleman in front of me, and the woman asked her. She said, and the woman asked him. I'm sorry. The woman asked him, she said, why are unions important? And I'm not begrudging this man. He just couldn't get. He didn't really give like a straight answer. I think he was just there for the money, whatever, which is fine. Work with dignity and grace. That's good. But when I got there, and I was like, unions are important because it gives us dignity. A worker power against the bosses. It protects us. We have benefits, whatever. And I told her I was a precinct captain for Bernie. She says, hey, on your first day on the job, you need to go talk to your union organizer because we need people like you. I was like, very base, very nice. You know what I'm saying?
Great.
So,
that's great.
Yeah, it was good stuff. And then Sam, I have a question for you about 2022 and 2024. In terms of Trump, you know what I'm saying? I'm not like a Trump watcher or anything, but I just find it very interesting because from outside appearances, right? It looks like, the investigations are closing in on him or whatever, but how much of a function of his running is actual him trying to evade the law or him trying to, I'm actually running just to get the power again, and maybe it's both, or do you think he actually has a chance or the Republicans, because for example, remember even back towards like when Chris Christie was out there, funded by ex-billionaire, nobody really knows. I feel like they've been putting the feelers out there to try to get the off-ramp from Trump, or at least some faction of the Republicans like, hey, we got to get the off-ramp. You see the writing on the wall. And I completely agree with you, Sam, when people are like, you saw Ducey out there, whatever, not slamming him, but like, hey, we got to get up the Trump juice. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How much? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think that I think issues with the law may be somewhat part of it, but I don't think it's the overarching thing. This guy has, and it's a separate conversation. He has evaded any type of accountability with the law for his entire life, which I find really, really stunning. In that I think has to be some explanation that we could spend a long time talking about. But I think look, I think for a guy like this, I think he runs, or at the very least, he pretends he's going to run up until the last moment because he wants the attention. But I think he might run because he's like, I did it once. Second time around can't be any harder. And I'll know what to do. And it was nice to be the king. And I think, he's embarrassed that he lost. I mean, that's what I think he believes that he was robbed, but I think he needs to believe that he was robbed because otherwise he has to believe that he lost. And so I think he wants to be president again. Look, I thought the first time that he was going to drop out, I didn't think that he was actually going to go through with it because I don't think that he thought he was going to win through most of that too. And I think he's like, this is going to be great for business and I'll be able to, but I think, once you win once, that changes the equation. Right. And, So I think he wants to win.
I think I agree with that assessment, Sam, but I just think it's very strange because, well, to be clear, right, Sam, because from my vantage point, it's almost like, well, he wants to run, but you're not serious, right? But we could say the same thing in 2016 that he wasn't serious. But he won anyway, right?
Yeah, he's
right?
just going about it the way he thinks he's going to win. Yeah, he may be right.
Right, but Sam, what's strange to me, it's like he's going through the he's going through the old class again. Fake news, stolen election, blah blah blah. It doesn't seem like he's generating the juice. And I see DeSantis rising again. He's not a shoo-in, right? But he's putting the feelers out there. And I just wonder how this is going to affect the midterms, because at the end of the day, Sam.
Well,
to be honest,
I think listen. I think those things are connected. I think for the most part, he's been told by his advisors, who he seems to be listening to a little bit more, lay low and run up to 2022, or at least up it to this point, because he doesn't have a great track record in terms of endorsing people and having them win
at all.
And so I think that he's sort of laying low with that stuff. That's why it feels like he doesn't have the juice. Remember, he didn't even come onto the scene until what would be the equivalent of mid 2023. He didn't even, so like you can't judge, you can't assess this right here, what's happening right now. I mean, if anything, he has more prominence than any, sort of potential political, presidential candidate, at this stage than anybody. And DeSantis is coming on, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but there's, again, there's going to be an anybody but Trump vote out there in the Republican Party, but I don't know that there's going to be anybody who's going to have as hard and of a base as Donald Trump in the Republican Party. Let me put it this way. So far, I do not see really any indication that anything would be any different this time around. Because even to the extent that people are coming out and criticizing him, they're criticizing him now because he's not out there. But once he puts himself forward, I would be very surprised to see these people criticize him in the same way, because they're going to be afraid. They're going to be afraid because his base is the Republican base. That has not changed. That has not changed.
And my final question for you, and I'll jump. And how much, again, this is just, kind of, napkin math or whatever, but how much of the 2022 race for the Democrats is going to hinge on kind of like the quote unquote Republican civil war, if there is going to be one, because I feel like with Biden's BBB in disaster, he has nothing to take to the table. So 2022 is looking bad, but I do see some marginal, but I think significant risks within the Republican Party. Answer the question when I get off. Left is best.
Okay,
take care, Sam.
Appreciate the call. I mean, right now, I don't see, I don't see anything that is going to mitigate sort of, I think the loss of the House for the Democrats. The Senate, I think, is a function of just like, they can't seem to get particularly good candidates. And, Ohio seems to me like there's going to be an opportunity for a pickup there, because particularly if Josh Mandel wins, because he's just like, dude is fringe. And I think I'm not convinced, or I should say I'm not unconvinced, that when we see stuff like this banning of Russian oil by Biden, I think a significant percentage of that move is a function of Ohio, of these Senate seats. And I think the calculus is we're going to lose the House. We may or may not have inflation 10 months out from now, or whatever it is, 9 months out, but it should go down, should be more oil production. But we need to show that we are, we're on the side of Ukraine. And a lot of Republicans are not. I mean, I think that's the political calculation. That's my guess. I don't know. I don't know. Meanwhile, listen to this. As you know, what are we up to now? 3 Starbucks that have unionized? And there's more happening around the country. One of the organizers up in Buffalo, a guy named Danny Rojas, he was a former Starbucks barista. He must have leaked this video. And when did the video, do we know when the video took place? Was this not, was it, oh, this was actually recorded on Monday? I'm not sure if it was recorded on Monday or was put out. But he was one of the organizers. He's getting fired from a Starbucks. Now, remember, it's illegal to fire people for organizing their unions. Depending on who's in the administration, National Labor Relations Board may be more vigilant at other times. They fired him last Friday. He came in on Monday looking for his job back. And he recorded it. I think, did it come from him? I think it must have. And listen to this. Of course, this is where he gets his health insurance. And it's illegal for them to fire him because he was part of the organizers, but you know that's what there was on their mind. And it's just a question of just waiting. What's the reason we're going to fire Danny? Here it is.
Hello. How are you? Doing well. How are you? Good. So we wanted to take the opportunity to follow up with you around the conversation that we had the other day, specifically in regard to attendance and some of the other things that we've been talking about as far as punctuality and Starbucks policies and stuff like that. So I wanted to let you know that we did contact some of our partner relations partners and have done all the appropriate measures to kind of work through all the facts of the information and the incident that happened and just some of the previous corrective actions. I'll be very clear because I believe we're clear as time. We are going to decide to separate today. So what that means is that I was having so many issues. I'm driving with my car being bad. I slept in the parking lot this morning to get here on time because my car is being seized. So I know this can be upsetting and I'm going to lose my health insurance. And I know that I have an entire sheet here full of a ton of information that discusses options with Cobra as far as being able to pick up health insurance options after leaving Starbucks. But at this time, you really do need to lean in though and just have that conversation around that. We kind of reached that point as far as the corrective action process, where because of multiple violations in different areas and final written warnings and corrective actions, that this is the direction that we're going to go. Alex, I've begged for the 2 years that I've been at this location to work at Elmwood to better support me because I work 2 jobs and I needed to be at a store closer. Please. So please, Danny, I do have to read through this with you. Alex, respectfully, this would not be happening if I wasn't part of the organizing committee. No, Alex, there are other partners who are always late. There are other partners who are not in dress code. No. There are other partners who are not following standards. There are partners who are misgendering me at work. We're only going to talk about you. Yes, because that is a deflection. It is a deflection. Is going to talk about you right now? No. Because we never discuss another partner's corrective actions or any type of conversations like that between us and other partners. We're talking about you. So this is a notice of separation. I'm going to read through it. I'm going to give you a copy to read along with me.
Notice of separation. That is the euphemism for we're firing you. We don't talk about the other people who have done the exact same things you do at work, because then we would be on record as acknowledging that what you did was no different than what other people did. And then we'd have to come up with another reason as to why we're notifying you of our separation from you. And, really, honestly, I mean, the amount of time that those 2 dudes, Danny, I guess, or not Danny, whoever the guy is he's talking to, who was the Alex or whatever it was, spent going over this with lawyers. mean, and the thing is that this is the reason why they do this, why Starbucks does this, because, you know, the union's already happening there. The reason why they do this is because, despite the fact that Howard Schultz said this is like when we were all in the Holocaust together and they're not sharing their blankets. The reason why they do this is because they want to send a message to workers at their other stores. They want to stem the bleeding. They want to prevent other stores from unionizing. And so and there's no doubt in my mind they're happy that this video is out there. This is an example they're setting, and they have gone over what they said, every single word, what they said in this has been checked by their legal people. And I mean, who's gonna step up at Starbucks and say like, "Hey, man, I did the exact same thing and I didn't get fired"? Maybe somebody will do that, but it won't necessarily make a difference. But that's what's going on here. And they're very generously put together a fact sheet about the different COBRA options that they have. And we should say, at one point during COVID, you could go on COBRA for free. That is no longer the case. So, dude gets fired, and well, I should say forced separation. It's really what it is from Starbucks. Meanwhile, other strike news. Minneapolis public school teachers on strike yesterday. 500 public school teachers take to the streets after going on strike to fight for fair pay and more COVID-19 support. In New York, they have gotten rid of the mask mandates in the schools. They're the Omicron BA2, I think, variant growing in New York State. Unclear how much traction it'll have, but this is a big march up in Minnesota. This is in Minneapolis, I should say. There we go. You know, I can't help but wonder if the protests that we saw through 2020 and following don't inspire protests like this. I mean, there's no way to know, and obviously it's not the same, necessarily the same issues and whatnot, but when people see other people going out and either affecting change or attempting to affect change, I think it inspires people. Certainly that's what happened with the Red State Revolt 2018, the teacher strikes around the country. So we'll see. Matt R. just posted a 5 easy steps to start a union flyer in my work's lunchroom. It was taken down in less than an hour. Is that legal? Back info. My work is a large manufacturer of school yearbooks and class rings based in Missouri and Tennessee. I don't know. I don't know if it's legal for them to take it down. Probably. I'm not sure about that, though. It's probably legal, I should say. Calling from a 303 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, is this me?
It is you. Hold on for 1 second. Folks can go to safeandstableschools.org to learn more about the strike in Minneapolis. That's from Tim from Minneapolis. Safeandstableschools.org. We'll put that in the show notes. Yes. Calling from a 303 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Graf from Colorado.
Graf from Colorado. What's on your mind?
Hi. Hi. I wanted to talk about the issues with the LGBT plus issues, like legislation for schools in particular.
Yeah, there's my understanding is that in Florida, DeSantis is about to sign the "Don't Say Gay" legislation, among others that are going around the country. But go ahead.
Yeah, it seems like there seems to be a wave of these bills passing through the legislation all across like conservative states. Do you think that there's going to be like a much bigger wave as we go down? And do you think as we reach near the elections, do you think that's going to, I don't know how to say this. Do you think these issues are going to be
forefronted?
Going to grow? Yes.
Yes.
You know, yes. Do you think
yes,
that
abortion,
these issues are
LGBTQ plus issues forefronted without a doubt?
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's also, do you think that these kind of things are also a way for these conservative governments to, for example, a way to control what is taught in schools, for example, like I noticed in the bills.
Yes.
Yes. And
look, listen, if you go back over the past 20 years, or probably more, 40 years, this is like every, you could just see it every election. They're talking about basically three things. Three things. Black people, abortion, gay people. That's it. That's it. Maybe every now and then it's guns, but the guns are really to protect you from the black people and the gay people. That's what, I mean, listen, this is how George Bush got reelected in 2004. They mobilized and they got on the ballot in, I don't know how many states it was, at least a half a dozen constitutional amendments to prevent gay people from marrying. And in the run up to the 2004 election, he went on national television, said, I want to push for a constitutional amendment on a federal level to keep gay people from marrying. Donald Trump, easier for him to go with Colin Kaepernick. But also, it was also abortion and trans stuff when in 2016. That's why they kept that Supreme Court seat open. Of course, there's no doubt about it. This is gonna be, you know, they try it with immigration, but it just doesn't seem to like have the same resonance. It's an important issue for the right, with no doubt, but it doesn't have the same resonance. You know, they tried to remember the migrant caravan that was going to happen. It was going to steal your summer home in Minneapolis. It didn't work. Wasn't enough. Yeah. And this is going to be all about, I mean, it's going to be about abortion, and it's going to be about, I mean, gay and trans.
What would you say would be the right now, for example, I live in Colorado, and right now it's a pretty, liberal state. It's pretty liberal, but what would you suggest for people, like me who live in like more conservative areas? What is the best way to fight for, trans kids, for the rights that the rights that you speak up about? What is the best way to fight for these things?
I mean, I think, I think, when people publicize, the dangers that these type of bills and things, create for trans people, I think that's helpful. I think going out and just simply protesting and showing support and standing in solidarity with trans folks shows, it's much harder to demonize people when they're not as isolated. I don't know if it's going to stop the legislation, but it's going to help the people who are being targeted by the legislation to know that there are other people who are supportive of them. And B, it's going to at least make these politicians think twice that maybe they don't have the numbers that they think they do. I mean, In some areas, it's just not gonna make a difference in terms of what the legislators do, but it's gonna make a difference in terms of how other people feel, whether they feel safe.
I also, yesterday I tried to make a call. I think yesterday it was housing that you were talking about in the Majority Report.
Yeah, Emma was hosting that show. I wasn't here.
Yeah, I know. I think and they were talking about while the Don't Say Gay bill was being passed through the Senate, and I wanted to call in specifically about how LGBT plus kids are probably like the highest risk for being homeless. So I think, is there also a way that we can support them, urge our politicians to to improve homeless shelters, or giving homes to these people?
I mean, we definitely need more housing. That, of course, that helps. It also, there was a Supreme Court case that there was a sense that it could have an impact on housing, but I don't think people understand that. Like in 20 some odd states, you can still discriminate against somebody in terms of housing based upon their being gay or trans.
There's also the whole issue with the Salvation Army, if you know that.
My understanding, Salvation Army is anti. They are not good on these issues.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to their homeless shelters. It's kind of the thing where it's very systematic, and I think in general these bills will definitely put a lot of Don't Say Gay bills and things like that will definitely make it a lot easier I don't want to say easier, I mean to say it will put a lot more kids out on the streets.
Yeah.
And that's just...
Well, also maybe think of running for local office.
Oh, yeah. I think that's also the one big thing. I don't think I can, but I think a lot of smarter people than me, a lot of braver people,
Dude, first of all, intelligence has never been a bar to holding office in this country.
Fair enough.
Never, ever, ever. It's probably a benefit.
Yeah. As someone with, ADHD and autism, it's just like you never see politicians ever say, "Oh, I have autism or ADHD," and it just feels like people will point it out and say, "Oh, that's a weakness,"
They might, but sometimes people also appreciate their politicians having some weaknesses and being public about them.
Okay.
I mean, one of the things
so
that people don't like are people who don't seem to have any weaknesses. It scares them, makes them feel like they're not like them. So I don't know. I would think about it. Appreciate the call.
Thank you so much. One more thing.
Yeah.
One more thing. Just really quick. I'm sorry I'm not the libertarian to give you I hope you're going to get a good libertarian in this one, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Oh, well, I appreciate that. That was nice. That was very thoughtful. Call from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Who's this?
Hi. Hey, Sam. This is Steve from Audubon.
Steve from Audubon?
That's right.
What is Audubon?
Audubon's a place in PA.
Oh, all right. Wasn't sure if you calling me from the German Autobahn, or if you were saying I'm calling from the Auto Barn. The Auto Barn. That's where we sell different car parts. The Autobahn.
No, more like James Audubon.
Okay.
Bird guy.
Okay. Very well. All right.
So I just wanted to say I appreciate the interview on Monday. Thanks for the updates on the strikes and what's going on with the organizing for Starbucks. I just wanted to go into what's going on with the situation with Ukraine. To me, it's still very hard to wrap my head around all the contradictions that are going on with just basic things watching people completely reverse their position on allowing refugees to enter into their country, things like that. Just watching people completely reverse their positions in a way that I don't understand it. For example, like how the news has been depicting the war protests in Russia. Have you been picking up on that at all?
Yeah, there's been thousands who have been arrested, and it's being perceived as being very brave. And
right.
When you compare that to the way that the protests were treated in this country against the Iraq War, you could have 500,000 people in New York City, plus getting trampled by horses. Incidentally, I saw it. I saw the cops ride in with their horses. And that never even, I mean, it must have made the local news, but I don't think it made even the national news for more than like a second.
Yeah, I remember you talking a bunch about like how you and Janine were like, when you were doing Air America, you would have to walk outside with bats, right? Because you were scared that someone was going to jump you when you were coming from the parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Janine would get stopped on the street prior to Air America. We get stopped on the street. She's walking down the street and on multiple occasions, some dude would jump out of his car and just start yelling at her.
Yeah, it was insane.
It was insane.
It was insane. I wanted to, and it's putting me in a weird position because, you know, you had that thing from Tucker, right? And Tucker's a POS, right?
Correct.
And when he's saying these things about the gas prices, he's full of it. He doesn't care about any of these people.
No.
But that doesn't mean that the fallout from inflation to the gas prices isn't real, and it's not going to hurt people.
Correct.
And it's not like seeing. And so when you see, like, I have a list here because I have trouble keeping my thoughts together. So with Manchin, just real quick, is his position on this solely based on geopolitics, or is this also because he's going to make money?
I mean, what do I think?
Yeah.
I think he's going to make money.
Okay.
I think he's going to make money, and it also serves the interests of the people who help him stay in office and who will help him in the future. It serves his people very narrowly.
Yeah, and it's just really, like I'm saying, like so many things have flipped. His thing for Build Back Better was
it causes inflation, right? Of course.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. Let's be honest here, though, and the price of gas is very high right now. In California, in certain parts, over $5. Other parts of the country, anywhere from like upper $3, through $4. I don't know how much this Russian thing's going to add. Maybe it adds 10%, 10 cents rather, to the price of gas. 10 cents, 15 cents, maybe. Some areas that's 5%. Some areas it's less than 5%. I mean, I don't think, this is going to be a big driver. What's more relevant is the fact that Saudi Arabia refuses to increase production, and they still have this deal with the rest of OPEC. I mean, we may be able to chip away, and right at this point now, we're going down and talking to President Guaido. That is a joke.
Yeah, that's what
Guaido does not exist anymore. We're trying to get Venezuela to up their production. And this is all in anticipation of this OPEC deal, which I think runs out very soon. And so, and we're going to try and find the first entity that's going to up production, and then the rest will follow.
I'm sorry, Sam. That was the thing the two things I wanted to get to with you. I wanted to, like, the possibilities that we have on the left to do something good policy wise. So do you see us being able to leverage this in any way to improve relations with Venezuela? Like get rid of those sanctions so that we can help the people down there?
I think it's happening. I think that's what's going to happen. I think Venezuela just released 2 prisoners. I think this is basically it. You never know. I mean, I mean, look, there's nothing the left can do that can influence this. This is just straight geopolitics. And we got something they want. They got something we want. They want us to stop supporting a rival government, a make-believe government of Venezuela. And they got oil and match made in heaven. Appreciate the call. Gotta go.
Okay.
Gotta go. You know what I love about Dave Rubin? I love the fact that Dave Rubin can speak to a topic of which he knows nothing about, which admittedly is almost every topic that Dave Rubin could ever talk about. Even stuff that is in Dave Rubin's wheelhouse, he doesn't know what he's saying. But when things are outside of his wheelhouse, he has the exact same amount of confidence as he does with things in his wheelhouse, and he is also equally completely deranged about all of it. Never knows what he's talking about, never in any way inhibits his ability to talk about them. And it works. He's been able to monetize that. He's made a whole career out of that. Here's Dave Rubin in his place down in Florida. He's escaped LA when I think he gave up all pretense that he was ever going to have a job in show business. Decided I'll stick with the Beck. I'm on the Beck train. As long as Beck's audience does not find out that I am gay and am married, I should be okay. Here is Dave Rubin talking about a lawsuit in New York City. Parents looking to overturn mask mandates for children in nurseries under 5. I don't know if we still have that mask mandate here. It's not in schools, but here is Dave Rubin opining about that.
And then the line that really gets you. These kids, he's talking about these toddlers, they're not tainted like adults. Think about what that means. He's right, they're not tainted like adults. Kids come into this world and they're born free and they're naive. The world is what is put in front of them. And then they need adults to teach them how to think. They need adults to teach them what freedom is and to be able to critically think about what's going on. A toddler cannot do that. So if you force a toddler to wear a mask and then make them feel one day when you're 5 years old, you'll be able to take off the mask, they're just going to believe you. So they are breeding a generation of robots, and that's what they want. They want a bunch of dependent, depressed robots. I'm sorry, there's just no other way to look at that. I just don't know how you could possibly see it any other way. And remember, he was supposed to be the good guy. He's not as crazy as lefty lunatic Bill de Blasio. That's what they said. And I'm sorry, if you now have a child that's 3 years old and you are living in New York City under the rule of that man, you're a child abuser in essence. I don't see a way around it. You're a child abuser. You are letting the state abuse your child, put your children in masks. We know kids are getting mouth sores. It's causing delayed speech and depression, all of the stuff. You all know all this stuff. And if you're just letting them do it, then congratulations. Your kids are going to put you in a really, really cheap old age home one day where you'll most likely be abused by one of their friends.
Okay. First off, I love his conception of toddlers. They're free. They're born free. That's right. Toddlers are being taught to accept authoritarian measures by wearing a mask, but not the, hey, dude, go wash your hands. Or, hey, dude, put pants on. Or put these shoes on. Or walk here. Or every other single function a toddler does almost at every point in the day is directed by an adult. Take your fingers out of your nose. Take your fingers out of your ass. Don't do this. You've got to wipe. You've got to go to the bathroom now. don't hit. Put your clothes back on. Put your shoes on. And first off, this whole developmental thing, I don't know if we've seen any significant studies suggesting that mask wearing is hurting developmentally. It is the case that I think we're seeing poor education outcomes because this pandemic prevented, at certain times during the pandemic, kids participating in school in a way that we have effectively figured out how to have people participate in schools. But if Dave Rubin was really concerned about the development of children at this age, their ability to, they're having delayed speech or whatever that he's claiming because inability to register emotion. Where is Dave calling for universal pre-K that Lefty de Blasio actually put in? Which we know for a fact affects educational outcomes 10 years down the road. What about universal pre-K? Why aren't you calling for that across the country if you're really worried about this? We know that kids going in from low-income households have a listening vocabulary deficit of tens of hundreds of thousands of words in some instances. They're just simply not exposed to it. It's not taken to a farm. Certain words don't come up if you're living in a city, vice versa. It doesn't go on an airplane. There's no reason to say the words like stewardess or, luggage cart or whatever it is. I don't know. The more experiences you have, the greater your vocabulary grows, your listening vocabulary, the more attention you get directly from adults. I'm in a house. Parents work 2 jobs. Kids put in front maybe of the television. Or there's a babysitter looking after a couple of different kids, but they're not trained to engage children. You're worried about development. And you promote universal pre-K, free pre-K, like the Lefty de Blasio instituted in this city. If you're calling the inhibition of kids' development child abuse, you may be on to something. As a society, we could be guilty of that very thing. All those taxes you didn't want to pay when you escaped to Florida so you didn't have to pay income taxes. Where do you think those taxes go? Some of it goes to the federal government, goes to federal grants that come back to these schools. Give me a break. Child abuse. Really, just like so nakedly. Work for Tucker. Work for Tucker. Whatever I can do to prevent my audience from realizing that I'm part of the problem. Because, once the right feels like they have outlawed, imagine he now lives in a state. He's just moved there where the governor is about to sign a bill saying that people like him cannot go in and teach elementary school kids and mention the fact that they are married. How do you think that, what is that? Well, what is going on in Dave Rubin's soul right now? Well, at least I'm not paying income taxes. I've gotten out of that Gestapo state in California and moved to the state of freedom in Florida, except for freedom to mention the fact that I'm married in a classroom in front of school kids, because that's actually now considered child abuse. Child abuse. Dude is running so hard from himself right now. It's unbelievable. calling from a 260 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 260. 260.
Hi, is this me?
It is you.
Oh, cool. I didn't mean to change the subject too much. I actually tried to call in a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was either Daniel Dayan or maybe Alex Perrine was talking about lowering pharmaceutical prices through negotiation and how that kind of fell out of Biden's agenda.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was David Dayan or Perrine, but go ahead.
Okay, so, oh, by the way, this is Benny Boy from Iowa. I forgot to.
Benny Boy from Iowa. Thank you.
So anyway, I'm a pharmaceutical developer and I work in rare diseases.
Okay.
So it's incredibly expensive to develop a pharmaceutical, obviously, and we end up in this situation where we can't sell to very many people. So
you can't very many people?
We can't sell to very many people because they're rare diseases.
Right.
So we end up setting these absurdly high prices. Like I think a year's course of treatment for our flagship medication is $300,000.
Jeez, okay.
And then it's so stupid. And it basically we work with like the government and various charities and stuff, and we try to pool together resources with the insurance so that the patient doesn't have to see that cost at all, because there's just no way anyone could pay for it. And my question essentially, and it's something I've sort of thought about a lot off and on as I listen to Majority Report, is that the reality of a lot of pharmaceuticals is that they're, even if you have a big selling audience, they're pretty expensive to develop. And I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on how do you support that development in a way that lowers prices?
I'll explain it to you right now. How much of that $300,000 on an annual basis that drug costs, how much of that is going to shareholders, going to marketing, going to non-development expenses? How much would you say?
60%, maybe.
Well, I think we have our answer.
You think? Well, I guess my question is how do you get the funding to the actual research within the framework of the current system?
How much do you think? Okay, so let's say, so of that $300,000 per person, right? We're taking a guess. 60% seems reasonable to me. So the cost of developing that drug is $140,000 for that individual. How much of that $140,000 is already subsidized by the government?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Probably 100%.
Well, I don't know if 100% is, but the delta between how much of that is already being supported by the government and what's left, we could cover with taxes. I mean,
well,
I think I think the government should be in the business is already in the business of developing most of this stuff, in my estimation. A significant portion of it.
Yeah.
And I think the government should be in the business of producing it. We do it with the VA on some generics. And if you want the government to mitigate some of the costs, you license it, at cost or under cost to other, governments around the world or other private entities outside of the country, and bingo, bango, we're now doing that, and we don't have to worry about the charities. We don't have to worry about the all of the work that goes into all of the energy that goes into marketing, to selling it, and then raising money so that the people don't actually have to pay for it, so the people could just profit. All we're doing, half of that process is just shuffling money in between people and having it go to the wealthiest of people. That's the way I would do it.
Yeah, the reason I said 100% is because, in my estimation, the charities, a lot of them, it's like rich people park their money in it to dodge taxes anyway.
Yeah.
And the insurance companies, they cover a huge part of it, but they're operating at a loss, and usually they try and appeal that to the government to get a refund anyway. And then the funding gap is usually closed by, the actual people who have the disease petition the government directly. Does that make sense?
So many of our industries are so subsidized by the government, but it is submerged. And as that money circulates around, other people skim a vig off it and make cash out of it. It's basically just another way. We're subsidizing it. I mean, this is the truth. This is the truth with so much in our society. The government is already subsidizing it. It's just doing it as a bank shot. It's like the way that we did the bailouts in 2008. The government is giving the money to the banks, and they're supposedly giving people a break, but they're just basically making money off it. And so it's a horribly inefficient system. We're already expending the money. I mean, look, we have the highest government expenditure per capita on healthcare as it is now. Never mind the fact that we don't provide health insurance for everybody. We're already spending more than any other government on health insurance, on health.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense.
Appreciate the call.
I appreciate you taking my call.
All right, bye-bye. All right, one more. App in VA. AP in a VA. Now I get it. Another day, another reference to Twitter, which went out of business in 2008. I don't give a shit. Twitter, etc., will exist forever in my mind. And I will reference that stereo store. Was it a national chain?
I've never heard of it before. I was a Radio Shack person.
Well, no. I mean, Radio Shack, you don't need to tell me about Radio Shack, dude. But Twitter was specific. It was the stereo store. Could someone please look that up and see if it was national?
100 stores in 18 U.S. states, mostly along the East Coast, but also including Illinois, Texas, California, Nevada, and Arizona.
Where was it founded?
Boston.
There you go. Listen to me. I want everybody to hear this. I'm putting my flag down right now. Twitter dies when I die. It will be alive and referenced on a consistent basis until I am unable to fashion my lips in such a way as to say the word tweeter, etc. Was it tweeter, etc.? Or did I making up the etc. part? Maybe they added that when they started to sell things like headphones. You guys you don't understand anything. You people, you don't understand a thing. If you've never been in one of those stores and they upgrade you they're like, oh, you could get that Kenwood. Or you could get this Kenwood. Look, I mean, it's an okay pair of speakers. But if you really want to blow the roof off, dude, check these out. They're taller than you are. DNC Google Pundit. I used to work at Twitter, and I got all my B&O shit. Bang & Olufsen. It was the fucking best. Jay Tingle saying you could use Leechmears next time. Yeah, but Leechmears was like a department store. Twitter, just stereos. It's amazing. There was a company dedicated to selling something that doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, you can buy receivers, right? But I mean, does anybody? Not really. I got to plug in my MP3s there. But why are you putting MP3s through a stereo system? It's like it's a compressed format. That's the hill I'm going to die on. Twitter, etc. All right, final call of the day. You got a lot of people who've been hanging on for a long time. Sorry, guys. I can't take all of you. Got a bunch of people hanging on the phone for 81 minutes. Calling from a 504 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? You are the final caller of the day.
This is Noah from New Orleans. So I want to talk about Joe Rogan and misinformation. My main goal is to prevent young males from dying of myocarditis for a vaccine which was rushed and based on new technology, and specifically that fact check of Joe Rogan by who was that, Josh, which was based on an article which is does not support its case, and it's actually based. I think.
Hey, dude. Hey, just calm down for a second. Calm down. Just take a deep breath.
Yeah.
You haven't stopped talking since you said hello. Okay.
Okay.
So you're saying this guy Josh posted an article. Josh who?
Oh no! So remember when Rogan was interviewing some guy? I think he's Australian. His name is Josh. I think.
Oh, Josh Zepps.
I'm wrong about
okay.
that.
Okay. So when Rogan was arguing with Josh Zepps, and Rogan said the incidence of myocarditis was higher with vaccination, and you're saying that Josh and Josh said actually myocarditis exists. With COVID
more
is
common
higher
infection.
Yeah. And then Rogan looked it up and found something that was consistent with that. And you're saying that that is wrong. That what is your contention?
Yeah.
Take it out of the realm of Josh and Joe.
Okay.
What is your contention?
Okay. Well, first of all, just finding an article that supports your case is not evidence. That's the first step. You have to actually read the article, because Joe Rogan had an article that he based his belief on. How do we settle the score? I mean, whoever finds the last article is the winner. And then when you look at the article that
what is your contention? Listen, stop. Listen. Listen.
Okay.
Stop talking about Josh and Joe.
What? I'm giving you evidence.
No, you're not giving me evidence. You're telling me Joe,
name.
Josh, this and that. What is your contention about myocarditis?
Myocarditis by the vaccine is caused more often by the vaccine in 18 to 24-year-olds, as the data shows, and that study.
Then what?
Shows,
then what?
Then COVID infection.
COVID infections. You're suggesting that 18 to 24-year-olds who get COVID do not get myocarditis at the rate that they do from the vaccinations. That's your contention.
Correct.
And you are citing what study?
I'm citing. Okay. Well,
I mean, dude, why are you acting so frustrated? I'm actually trying to help you communicate your point. And I don't know why you're acting frustrated. Like, oh, I've got to cite a study. Yeah, cite the study.
I'm not acting frustrated. You have to let me get out a complete thought. Okay. Because you guys said he was wrong because of a study. And I'm telling you, I keep mentioning his name just to indicate which argument we're talking about. He brought up a study. It was a Nature article that said that COVID infection causes more myocarditis. And that is based on observational data that did not look at age groups. And you have to do more than just find a study that supports the case. That's
so
why
what's the study you're citing to support your contention? No, you can't do it the way you want to do it. I just want to know what the contention is.
I'm going to tell you why I even side. That's why I'm going to even tell you why I side when you ask me for it. Because you can't. I'm going to tell you a study, but you can't just find a study. You have to actually read the study. You can't just say, "Oh, look, I found a study."
I will read the study. All you're doing is making an assertion.
Okay. All right. I have to tell you what my approach is here. The studies that you're reading are based on observational data, just like theirs is minimized because it's based on observational data. What we need is a
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you say VAERS? VAERS?
Yeah.
VAERS is not a study.
No, but it's observational data, just like that. This study.
Self-reported observational data, not doctors.
Yeah. So some doctor Googled myocarditis and found all the cases in this index. It's not a randomized prospective study. It's just Google. They searched. I mean, not even Google. They searched in the database and found myocarditis, and they found COVID infection. that's how they got their data. That's not the way you get the right numbers. So if you really want to make this vaccine shown to be safe, you got to do a randomized prospective study. You need 10,000 people in each arm.
Whoa. We didn't say safe, did we? What happens with myocarditis? Tell me what is the danger associated with myocarditis? How many people?
It's very dangerous. It has a high mortality.
Oh, it does. Is that right?
Mild myocarditis.
Is that really the case?
I'm not. So this is how you win debates, by interrupting the point.
No. Listen, you keep dancing around on stuff. All right. Let's be clear. Let's be clear.
You're moving on to another point.
No.
You're moving on to another point.
I will go back to the original point, which is you made an assertion that the incidence of myocarditis between the ages of males between the ages of 18 to 24 is greater than the incidence of myocarditis from COVID in the ages of 18 to 24 males. Cite your evidence.
Okay, I'm going to find this. I'm going to find the study. The study is by Hoag, H-O-E-G, and it
H-O-E-G.
H-O-E-G is the author. One second. What are you gonna read it live? No, this is my whole point. What are you gonna do? Read it now?
Well, you think I'm just gonna let you come and make an assertion like that and not even tell people what you're citing it on? I mean, you're sitting here. You're basically sitting here. When was that study released?
1 second.
Well, I mean, I don't understand how you come on here preparing for this call. You're going to make this assertion.
What do you mean? I'm going to tell you why that you're wrong about that point too, because I'm not prepared to hand you a study you're not going to understand or be able to read right now anyway.
Excuse me, doctor. Excuse me, doctor. Are you a doctor?
Yes.
You are.
I'm not giving you my background. I have a scientific background and I can read something. But even if you're not a doctor, you would have to spend.
Well, I know that I have spoken to doctors who have told me that myocarditis is a fairly common thing. Do you know what it involves when you get myocarditis?
No, it's not very common at all. It's very rare, and and you have to be hospitalized.
You are high right now. Dude.
No. So
yes.
What are you basing that on?
I'm done because I've spoken to doctors who tell me pediatricians. I've spoken to epidemiologists who say, you know what you need for myocarditis? A couple of days rest.
Yes, that's bullshit. Bullshit.
Oh, really?
You have to be admitted to the hospital. You want me to read you? I can read you a guideline on myocarditis that tells you exactly. Here it is. When myocarditis is suspected, this is academic.oup.com, a European article, a European medical journal. When myocarditis is suspected in asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic patients, according to admission to the hospital and clinical monitoring.
Asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic? What? Asymptomatic of what?
If you have myocarditis, you could be asymptomatic. That means you might not have chest pain, or you might not have shortness of breath, or you might not have arrhythmias. You could be asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic.
This is myocarditis as a function of what? Of something else, or just the incidence of myocarditis that just shows up for no reason?
This was before COVID. I'm telling you the definition, what they recommended.
Listen, what you are doing is you're conflating two things. Myocarditis.
No, I'm not conflating anything.
Excuse me.
You hurt my whole point.
Excuse me. Myocarditis as a function of the flu, let's say, or myocarditis as a function of a primary infection, or myocarditis as a function of getting a vaccine is different from the presence of myocarditis for unexplained
all
reasons.
These children were admitted to the hospital just like pre-COVID. They admitted and put them on a monitor.
Dude,
they did echocardiograms.
That's because they want to know why the kid has myocarditis. If they know if the kid has the flu and they get myocarditis,
and they progress to heart failure. You're not letting me finish. Every case that you cannot call myocarditis mild. That's like calling a stroke mild.
No, it is not. You are wrong.
It's mild in comparison to other cases. You
are wrong.
What are you basing my being wrong on?
Every doctor I've spoken to about this.
I can tell you the study that Malone quoted that they.
That Malone quoted. Can you find somebody else besides the lunatic?
Can you let me finish the thought? So I'm identifying the study. It was a Hong Kong study where they claimed that all the cases were mild. But all these cases were admitted to the hospital. They had decreased heart function. They have to stay on a monitor for days. The MRI showed possible evidence of future
What
scarring.
study is that?
They can't
so that people can go and read it, other than your assertion of it. The sort of doctor.
Okay, hold on a second. So here, first, before I go on to the other study, this is the study for the one that shows the connection, the Hogue study I mentioned earlier, and then I'll tell you the other one. SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccine.
How many cases of myocarditis?
Do you want the study or not? Now you don't want the study?
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Say the study.
The SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccination associated myocarditis in children ages 12-17, a stratified national database analysis.
And who did it? Where can we find that? Do you want to give us a link?
The link is medrxiv.org/content/
medrxiv.org. Oh, wait a second. I've obviously been there before. Okay.
If you Google the title, you'll find it.
Mask wearing notably reduces COVID-19 transmission. I guess that was a different study from that same RXIV. This is by BMJ and Yale. I'm sorry, that comes up with masks. Mask wearing notably reduces COVID-19 transmission. That's obviously not the one that you're talking about.
The author is Tracy Beth Hogue, Hoeg. The Hogue has a line through it. The O has a line through it.
Tracy Beth Hogue, okay. And this is a, what do we got here? Can't find anything. I will look through it. And what does it claim to say?
That COVID vaccine causes myocarditis, is increase in myocarditis. But I didn't finish the thought on myocarditis, mild versus the mild myocarditis you're talking about. You cannot call something mild on the basis of initial signals from VAERS, which they
I'm not talking about VAERS.
Investigated.
Myocarditis. I'm not talking about.
That's how they figure it out. That's how they found the connection to myocarditis.
Wait a second. Who's VAERS? Okay, listen. VAERS is self-reported.
That's how it first came up.
But myocarditis. Myocarditis takes place distinct from COVID, distinct from vaccines. How many cases worldwide per year?
When you get
how many cases? How many cases?
That's reported.
How many cases of viral? There's a difference between like viral myocarditis. There's a difference between carditis that is a function of a primary infection. These are you're conflating all sorts of different things.
I'm not conflating anything. I didn't. What do you mean I'm conflating? What does that mean?
What does conflating mean?
I know what conflating means. What do you mean by saying I'm conflating it? You can't decide that something is not mild simply because they're first uncovering the data on all this stuff. You can't just say, oh, well, it's just mostly mild. We just figured this out. We haven't figured out anything. We need more time. It takes years to figure out what exactly the pathophysiology of a disease is. You can't just call it mild. Oh, most of them did okay. Most of them did not do okay. They had to spend days in the hospital.
You're saying the majority of people who get myocarditis go to the hospital.
They get admitted to make sure they don't die.
Okay, you're saying the majority of people. You're saying okay. Let me just be clear here, because I want people to be able to go and talk to their own doctor.
People are afraid to debate because you let them.
Listen. I'm just getting you. It is a thought. It is a thought.
You're going to think everything I say is wrong.
Listen, yes, everything you're saying is wrong. But listen to me.
Because other people told you I'm wrong. That's not evidence.
No. Nobody knew you were wrong. Listen.
Why don't you get it?
I want to be clear.
Talk to me.
Hold on.
Because
I want you. Hold on. Hold on. I want to be clear. Just all I'm doing is restating your assertions so that people can go and ask a qualified physician as to whether some of your assertions are correct. And let me finish. Your assertion is that the majority of people who get myocarditis must be hospitalized for it. Is that correct? Is that your assertion?
What do you mean? Yes. They must be hospitalized for a few days to figure out if they're going to be asymptomatic or the ones going to die. And then you still need a
now what I want. I'm going to let you continue to talk. I'm going to let you to continue to talk, but I want everyone to hear this so they can know your credibility. Next time you see your doctor, or if you know a physician, I want you to shut up for 1 second. I'm going to let you talk after I say this to my audience. No. I'm not. I'm just repeating what you said. I want them to go to their doctor and say, doctor, are the majority of people who get myocarditis from a flu, from a vaccine, from whatever it is, must they be hospitalized for multiple days? And when the doctor says, no, they should take it easy, shouldn't go jog, should rest sometimes, then they'll know that your call is completely bogus. Get another doctor, that doctor's an idiot. But if their doctor says, absolutely, yes, whenever we have incidences of myocarditis, or at least majority of them, we hospitalize people for multiple days to make sure that they don't die because it's like a stroke. Then they'll know Sam is full of shit.
Even mild strokes may reverse themselves in a matter of minutes, but you still don't know if it's going to progress or not. So in that situation,
also people should say, is myocarditis like a stroke? And when the doctor says no.
So dude, you're not letting me talk. You're not answering my point. No wonder you're such a great debater.
Yes.
You interrupt and you don't know what.
Keep talking.
Mild myocarditis is not a mild thing that you can just blow off. If you have myocarditis, so you have an interview. There's one lady whose son was interviewed. She was interviewed on a podcast where she talked. She was at first all happy. She's a molecular biologist, by the way. She was all happy about getting the vaccine, and her son got vaccinated. And then now she didn't realize it's months of lots of bills, months of follow-ups with a cardiologist. You got to make sure your heart doesn't have permanent damage, even if you were a mild case. I can read you. Here's the Hong Kong study that you wanted to know about, that Malone mentioned, and supposedly that one was all the subjects were mild in that case. Okay, you listening? You want to take the title of the study is Epidemiology of Acute Myocarditis / Pericarditis in Hong Kong Adolescents Following Community Vaccination. You got that?
Yeah.
That's a great argument. Whispering.
I said, yeah.
So this Science versus podcast interviewed the doctor from this study to debunk Malone, and this doctor said no, they were all mild cases. So in other words, saying what you're claiming right now. Okay, you got that?
No, I honestly can't understand what you're talking about.
The study that Malone brought up, all the subjects were mild myocarditis, like you're claiming. A podcast interviewed the doctor that did this study, and he agreed that Malone was wrong. In other words, agreeing with you, all the cases in this study were also mild. Okay? Are you following me?
So this doctor on this podcast said that Malone was wrong, and that's where we're at right now.
The doctor who did the study, he claimed all the subjects were mild cases, just like you're claiming. And I'm going to tell you here what mild is. And here, 35 subjects, and there were cases with decreased left ventricular function, 2 of them. That means your heart is not pumping as well as it normally does. Does that sound like mild to you? They had subjects with
yes, it does.
Late gadolinium enhancement, which is an indicative
Sounds mild to me.
Of scarring in the heart. You can look up the study yourself if you want to bring it up right now, and you can scroll down to the bottom of it, and you can see what I'm reading. Borderline LV function, patchy edema, diffuse patchy pericardial and subpericardial, late gadolinium enhancement.
Okay.
These are the mild cases.
Right.
Your heart's not working as well. They're calling that mild.
Okay.
When your heart is not pumping effectively, that's not a mild thing, even if it gets better.
Doctor, excuse me. Excuse me.
What? Yes.
You're familiar with here's let me read to you, okay? This from Penn Medicine. This is just something that somebody sent while we're talking. Myocarditis. What is myocarditis? It's an inflammation of the heart tissue. That doesn't sound mild to me. Holy shit. Specifically the myocardium. It's the middle layer of the heart wall.
It affects your heart's electrical system. Whoa. Most cases of myocarditis are caused by an infection. And then it says the symptoms: viral infection, rapid abnormal chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue. Diagnosis: it takes an EKG or a chest x-ray or an MRI or a blood test or cardiac authorization. Treatment at Penn. For many people with mild cases, myocarditis usually improves on its own or with medication. With rest and antibiotics to fight the indication, you may experience a complete recovery. I mean, this is the case.
So yeah,
that myocarditis can be very mild, in fact. The Hoag study that you are citing apparently is not peer-reviewed yet. It may be in the future.
My God. See, that's what I'm talking about. So you're going to find something like that my study's not peer-reviewed, but your study, you find a study. Did they look whether
it's not a study? It's just a report from a doctor. I mean, it's like, it's such settled.
That's not the way doctors argue about studies. They don't say, "Oh, was this peer-reviewed? Oh, was this from the New England Journal of Medicine? Oh, was this?" Like, they don't go by that way. You have to read the study, look at the data, look if there were any problems with it.
You mean?
How did they get?
You mean data? they review it
actually read
as if like they were peers? In other words.
Okay, fine. Then get a peer and let him speak to Malone, or get Malone on there and interview him. And let Osterholm or whoever you interview, let them speak to each other. But that won't happen because your side is afraid to debate. So let that happen on live. Let them talk. Getting a doctor who's an epidemiologist, whatever, oh my God, he's an epidemiologist, to tell you that I was wrong. It's not an argument, because I can get you one that tells you you're wrong. So here's the deal. But I can give you things that you can validate yourself, so you won't kill your child with a vaccine.
Oh, shut up! Shut up about that! Shut up about that! Don't ever say that again on this program, or I hang up on you. All right, a-hole.
Okay,
there have been millions of children, who have received this vaccine and have not been killed. You're an asshole. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're right. You and I can't debate this because you're an idiot.
Shouting me down and calling me an idiot. Brilliant. I can validate everything I say.
I know it. You had 22 minutes. And the assertions that people can go out and test is ask your doctor. Doctor, have you seen cases of myocarditis? Do the majority of those cases require hospitalization for multiple days? If the answer is no, then yes, sir, you sort of a doctor are an idiot. If the answer is yes, then what I have been peddling has been absolute lies. Doctor, do you hold more stake in a study that has been peer-reviewed or not? If they say, actually, it doesn't matter if it's been peer-reviewed. That doesn't influence my perspective on a study whatsoever. Peer-reviewed. If the doctor you talk to says peer review, seriously? No, that's just so that people can make cash. Then people can have faith in what your argument was. If the doctor says, yeah, no, I feel a little obviously more confident when a study has been peer reviewed, because people can make mistakes. And so a peer review looks into the way that the data is collected. It looks into certain assumptions that were made that may not be clear in the preprint. Then folks can determine that maybe what I had to say had more validity. I mean, that's basically it. Well, I should have checked if this dude was a libertarian. We'll get some more calls on this tomorrow, I imagine. People can call back and we can have some actual doctors. I like to. Are you a doctor? Yeah.
I've chiropracted before.
Honestly, like I spoken to, I don't know, somewhere between a half a dozen and a dozen physicians, specifically about myocarditis. And they're like, it's pretty common. relatively speaking. I mean, it would be if there is nothing that myocarditis can be attributed to. In other words, if it's not a function of getting a vaccine, and it happens with other vaccines too, apparently, or if it's not a function of like kids got a cold or like a virus or flu or something like that, I would imagine they'd be like, we need to check out why your heart's acting this way. Why is your heart inflamed if we don't see anything else that could be contributing to it? Then I would imagine. But and the thing that I find like that was particularly annoying is all I was trying to do was, because he's making multiple assertions in each statement, and I just want to make it clear what those assertions are. And I don't care, Josh, John, Josh, Joe, John, Joe. That doesn't make a difference to me. The back and forth, which one of those two is right. At the end of the day, I don't care which one of those two is right as much as I care as to what's going out on a platform of 11 million people or a platform, much, much smaller platform like this one. In terms of information, you know, I mean, it's one thing to say like, Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback in the history of ever, or if we're wrong about that, then that's okay. It's one thing to say that Snapdragon is far superior to a Cortland. And we're not wrong about that. If we were to say a Cortland's superior to a Snapdragon, Apple, then I would have an issue with that. That would actually be very problematic. Maybe apples aren't a really good topic for me to talk about that, but all right. A couple more IMs that were, holy crap. It's 3:00. Son of a bitch. That guy. That guy. That bastard. That bastard extended the show. How does that always happen? It's the last call of the day. This is where I really miss Michael, because had I looked over and seen Michael, just been like, please, no. And I would have talked to that guy for another 20 minutes. Michael just be like, oh, Jesus, really, seriously? I got honestly, dude, I gotta. No, don't. Oh, God. Ken Griffin sucks. Would love to see you guys interview Dr. Susan Trimbath here or David Lauer after his appearance on Jon Stewart show last week. Love the show, even with the average age higher than ever today. Will you write down those names, Dr. Susan Trimbath and David Lauer? I don't know who those people are. Dave Peretti. Sam, good news. Mesa, Colorado GOP Secretary of State Tina Peters indicated for election fraud. Indicted. Indicated? I don't know. Indicated says. I hope my pillow guy is next. Oh, indicted by grand jury. Oh, interesting. Ryan in Los Angeles. I know a guy who actually served time in federal prison because he refused to go to Vietnam. Nature is one of the world's most respected peer-reviewed scientific journals. This guy quotes what source? Dumb cluck revenue effing Rogan listeners. It never once occurred to him that he was wrong. Wait. He's saying that all the cases from the vaccination are mild, and somehow that proves Rogan isn't a dumb shit? I couldn't follow what he was saying there. Coupe was at a solidarity rally in Brooklyn for Starbucks voting to unionize in Gravesend. If it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. That's exciting. Mickey 7. No way, dude is a doctor. Spencer Williams. Did you guys book Scotty B for the Boston show? Oh, that would have been awesome. Matthew from Indianapolis. I know. I said that. Just got off the phone with Paul Prescott. People may know him as Labor Paul and Jack have been running for state senate in Pennsylvania. Only 2 months left in the race. I'll leave his donation link here. Send an email with that. That would be great, because I can't access it that way. All right, I know. I said I just want to read a couple more of these. Thames Darwin. Sam, the website the guy pointed you to is a preprint archive, which means the work hasn't been peer reviewed. In addition, an article by Munro and BMJ challenges the validity of Hoag's study. Finally, Hoag's area of specialization is not virology, pediatrics, or cardiology. It's orthopedic surgery. Well, A square. Sam, thanks for playing that full clip. Not only was the language telling, but the fact that it was done open door. Usually employers don't disclose that or do it in front of other employees unless they want to use it as a means of control and to drive a policy behavior, like in the old factory setting. Guess Starbucks not afraid of a lawsuit for wrongful termination. No person mentioned that they were being misgendered and more afraid of unionization. Judy Ruliani. I love these nerds out there call you a great debater when they call into your show to yell. Tom Cruise. The Hoag study the caller is citing is not yet peer-reviewed. It's also based on an observational data using VAERS as the data set. And VAERS, incidentally, became essentially a magnet for lunacy. But even still. Jay Tingle, I still have an item purchased from Tweeter Inc. You could have used Leechmere next. Yeah, Tweeter, etc. Thank you. Thank you. Jen Hexer. From WebMD, your doctor will also probably suggest rest or reduced activity. They'll probably also put you on a low-salt diet to keep fluid from building up. You may be hospitalized if you have complications like a blood clot or weakened heart. If abnormal heart rhythms are severe, you may need other medications, yes. All right, 2 more of these. I'm sorry, folks. I don't know why you're apologizing. You could just hang up. I'm really apologizing to Dorsey and Bradley. Father of homunculus. I still break out my portable mini disc player from time to time. Oh, the memories. Good times indeed. Phyllis Raptor. Skepticism isn't simple contradiction, and cynicism isn't a replacement for consistency. Screaming temper tantrums aren't the sign of a confident position. Oh, I see. He doesn't stop talking long enough to ever receive input. Well, that will keep him from ever figuring out he's incorrect. Sam, you're not letting me talk. Let me talk, damn it. Okay, Mom. I think I speak for the entire New Orleans metro area, 504 area code, by saying we don't claim this dumbass. Hill. Do people seriously think self-reported, unscrutinized VAERS data is acceptable scientific evidence? Good God, if his evidence is VAERS, it isn't evidence, as my previous IM said. The left has MIDI doctors and the right has shitty doctors. All right, 2 more. Dank Uger. This is too good. Is this a planted call from a paid actor, Sam? This call is giving me severe myocarditis. I just got pissed when he started saying, "You're killing your kids." All right, the final IM of the day. Another long hauler. Are anti-vaxxers the new libertarians? I hope much less based in reality and much more pedantic. It's kind of amazing. And the final IM of the day. Foresto, how does the study of children aged 12 to 17 imply anything about adults aged 18 to 24? Leftists are so afraid to debate that you just spent 20 minutes debating them. Folks, Bradley, Dorsey, extra specially good job today. Involved a lot of patience. See you tomorrow.
Somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot lights shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option Don't get